Welcome everybody to episode number 26 of Sports Cards Live. Another great show lined up tonight, one that I've been looking forward to for a long time. And I got to admit, I know I say that basically every time, but it is 100% true every time. I look forward to this all throughout the day, all throughout the week, like just leading up for it. Actually, as soon as I book a guest, I literally cannot wait to do the show with said guest. It's just really so much fun. So this is episode number 26. Episode number 25 was back on Saturday with Sean Chalk, who is the Wayne Gretzky of Wayne Gretzky Collectors. Please go check out that episode. It lives on the YouTube channel, Sports Cards Live. And again, I like to warn everybody, these episodes are long. They go up to 2 hours, sometimes even longer. So don't feel like you got to watch it all at once. It's a lot of time. Watch it in bits and bites here and there. YouTube will remember where you left off. I also want to thank Chris McGill, who was my guest last Wednesday, episode number 24. We missed his favorite player, Jordan, we missed giving him episode number 23, by one. And we have that same issue tonight, but we won't talk about that right now. I also want to thank Chris for having me as his guest on his episode 5 of Conversations with Chris. It was pretty cool because episode number 4, he had Dr. James Beckett as his guest, which was just, who doesn't want to follow Dr. James Beckett? Couldn't be prouder. So thanks again to Chris and the House of Jordans for that. Coming up on Saturday, my guest is Chris Barr. Chris is the product manager at Panini for the basketball line of cards. If you're a basketball fan, I know many of you are, especially if you're here to watch Adam on this show tonight. You're going to want to tune in on Saturday. Chris Barr has been working in the industry for several years and is going to be an amazing guy to chat with about what goes on at Panini and basketball cards and all sorts of wonderful stuff. And then following Chris, next Saturday is going to be Grant Sandground. Grant is the director of product development for Upper Deck. So that's going to be another really informational, interesting discussion. So be sure to come and check that out. If it's your first time watching Sports Cards Live, thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Adam, for bringing new guests to the show. And please do consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. If you don't mind, I would greatly appreciate it. Okay, I have a list of shout outs to do for various channels that I just want to mention. A bunch of guys out there creating content. So I'm just going to run through these guys, all right? I'm sure a bunch of them, hopefully some of them are in the room tonight. We'll see them shortly, but I just want to go through this right now. And I want to mention that if you go to the YouTube channel for Sports Cards Live, on the main page, there is a list of sort of my favorite YouTube channels. And all these guys are listed there, so I want to shout them out. House of Jordans, of course, goes without saying. Ziggy No. Ziggy does a weekly content review among other sort of videos. Check out Ziggy No. Because I'm Carlos. Carlos, just a great guy to watch and listen to. Covers a lot of hockey, really interesting stuff. The Personal Finance Dad. Another guy you have to be watching if you are looking for more content. 90s b-ball cards, another great one. Just entertaining stuff. There's people out there doing entertaining YouTube content. CRT Sports Cards, especially if you're interested in Topps Project 2020. The Center Ice Cardcast is a relatively new hockey podcast, and they are coming up. I think they just did episode 6. And finally, my buddy Eric at Beckett Media. Check out his show, Beckett Live Presents. It has great guests, including Steve Grad, which is a regular appearance for them. Usually on Tuesdays. They call that show Grad School. All right, let's bring out tonight's guest. His name is Adam. He goes by the Real 27 guy on Instagram. He has close to 3,000 followers. Maybe we can get him there after tonight. He is a truly an advanced and passionate basketball card collector. Let's bring him out. Adam, it is amazing to have you here on episode number 26 of Sports Cards Live. I've been looking forward to this, as I just said, for quite some time, ever since I asked you to come on, ever since I actually started planning the show, and you and I were chatting on Instagram a little bit about it, and I knew that you were on my hit list to get on here, so it's great to have you. You ready to do this? How are you doing tonight?
Dude, I am so glad that you invited me. The thing that you're not telling people is I basically had to beg you to be one of the guests amongst these incredible guests that you've had on as of late. Guys like Steve Grad and Chris and Justin and just a bunch of guys who are a whole heck of a lot smarter than me. So the only thing that I have to complain about is episode number 26. I mean, couldn't we have waited just a couple of days? Couldn't we have just done that?
I need to start thinking about this a little bit more closely and lining up episodes with numbers that are important to my guests. You go by the real 27 guy, and I have you on episode 26. Like just like with Chris McGill, I missed you by one episode, and I sure wish I could undo that. But hey, you know what? We're booked. We're gonna do it. We're gonna have a great time nonetheless. Before we jump into the topics, and we're gonna talk about sort of how do we really know each other. We're going to go through your history in the hobby. We're going to talk about your podcast a little bit, your presence on Instagram, and a bunch of other things. Before we do that, we got people in the room already. Let's say some hellos. Welcome people to the show. See who's here, and then we'll kick it off. So we got Daniel. Daniel, good evening, everyone. Looking forward to another great. Daniel, thank you for watching as usual. I sent you your cards today, as you well know. 90s B-ball cards right there. I've been looking forward to this one all day. Thank you for tuning in, of course. Josh says, good evening, everyone. Looking forward to another. Thank you, Josh, for tuning in. Irving, I use it as a sleep relaxer, whatever it takes, Irving. And we're just happy to have you here, my man. Happy to have you. Austin, good evening. Irving again, Irving again, Irving again. Adil, welcome to the show. Adil's one of my poker buddies. Happy to have you, Adil. Thanks for tuning in. Carlos, never heard of Carlos, your sarcasm. I love it, man. That's why I watch your show. Jason, good evening. Good to have you. Ziggy, welcome as usual. 90s B-ball cards. Hey, man, you are welcome. My number 22, we missed that opportunity. Next time for me is 72. Well, that's going to be several months down the road. But Jake, we'll try and get you on for episode number 72. I'll write it down right now. Hey, Ralphie's in the house. He's heating up. Jams it in. All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Great to have you all here. So, Adam, we're going to kick it off. I've known you from your Instagram account for probably a year and a half now. Like I said earlier, you've got almost 3,000 followers. That's epic. That's a lot of followers. So you're very well known on Instagram. Before we kick it off, really, how, I remember I met you for the first time at the National in August in Chicago last year. Can you sort of tell everybody watching, how did that go down? How did we really meet for the first time?
Well, I think what happens in this hobby a lot of times is you'll see somebody on a message board. You'll kind of take notice of them. You kind of can sometimes see when somebody's one of the smarter guys. And so I did know you, and you said your name when we met at the National last year, and I went, okay, yeah, and I had to think about it there for a second, but it was awesome because you just like you show on this show that you do, you have a great enthusiasm, right? So like you saw me and you were like, Adam, the 27 guy, I know you, like, let's talk about your cards. And then you were like, do you have the such and such card with you? And I was like, yeah. And you took a picture with me with some of the cards, which was like, for me, felt really like amazing. I was like, wow, somebody knows who I am, and this Jeremy guy's pretty cool. So yeah, that was kind of our first moment where we kind of got to know each other, and we hung out for, I don't know, half an hour, you, me, and Rodman, and yeah, we just had a blast. The National was awesome.
Yeah, and you had a box filled with cards, and I mean that box was something that you couldn't take your eyes off it for a second. You'd probably get really nervous. It was an amazing box filled with amazing cards, and I remember one of the cards that you had was your Michael Jordan Jambalaya, the '97 Jambalaya, and I remember saying, "Hey, can I hold that? I want to see it." I hadn't ever held one in my life before. I've seen these cards selling on eBay at card shows for pretty big numbers along the way, and here was one in flesh and blood, and I got to actually hold it and look at it. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to own one of these, maybe one day. Well, lo and behold, I have one now, because it never left my mind that was amongst your box of amazing cardboard was this Jambalaya, which to me was kind of the most iconic Jordan insert of the 90s. I think a lot of people feel that way. And I could never stop pining for it. And I moved some things around earlier this year, and I managed to pick one up. So I kind of blame you for that, although blame isn't the fair word really, but I thank you for that as well. And it left a good, that out. And the reason why we're talking about this for people watching it, again, it comes down to the community of the hobby. It comes down to the relationships that we build through the hobby, starting online a lot of the times, moving into the card shows. And it was cool for me to, I'd seen in your Instagram account, I'd seen the odd picture of your face. So I did kind of know what you looked like. But to see somebody that you only see through Instagram or Facebook or wherever in the flesh and blood, walking the floor of the biggest card show in the world, it was just cool. And, hanging out with Rodman, another advanced and really passionate basketball collector, really made that show for me. So I kind of came out of that show with two guys I consider friends, you and him, amongst other people that I met. And it was just a really great way to really sort of immerse myself in the basketball culture, because I do come mostly from the hockey end of things. So I want to thank you for that. I want to just welcome a few more people who are here. This is Amit. Hi, Jeremy decided to do YouTube today. Amit, good. Always better to watch on YouTube, guys, because you do get the, you're not delayed as you are on Facebook. Carlos is here. Should be fun. Love the podcast as well. So looking forward to this one. So Carlos watches your podcast, Adam, and we will talk about that a little bit in a little bit here. Hermanamak, I am Adam's son. Is that your son for real?
Yeah, Hermanamak, I think, is my wife's account. So that is Aaron, my son, who's logging in there, which is
right on.
Aaron, I told him that he should do it tonight. So he probably has to go to bed before the end of it, but glad to have him here for the moment.
Aaron, welcome to Sports Cards Live. It's awesome to have your dad on the show. So thank you yourself for tuning in. Okay, let's get into it. So let's start with your history in the hobby. We all come from a different hobby, a different history. We all got to today differently, sort of whether you came in when you were 5 years old or you came in 5 months ago or 5 years ago. What's your story? Kind of how did you get into the hobby and what brought you to today and as far as collecting goes?
Yeah, I think when you ask this question of a lot of the basketball guys that you'll have on, they'll say something about how they came back in 2015 or 2016. I'm one of those very strange individuals who just never left. I started collecting in the late 80s when I was a really young kid. I remember my first basketball card was a 1987 Magic Johnson Fleer card. I collected the 1990 Hoops set. And I can tell you about basically where I was and what I was collecting literally every year of my life since then. So I worked at a card shop for about 7 years, and that gave me great experience. And then, basically buying and selling cards became a way for me to pay for my college, pay for a lot of different things along the way. And at various times I've been very strong on the flipper side, or what people might call the investor side. And then, but now I find myself kind of in a different spot and more just a guy who's just always trying to make his collection, better. So, but always just a basketball guy. That's all I collect. You could name about 5 hockey players before I would get to the end of my list of current hockey stars. But I think of myself, maybe I'm not, but I think of myself as being somebody who's pretty well versed in the world of basketball cards.
Yeah, I'd agree with that from what I've seen. At what point did you find yourself really getting into the 90s inserts, which are all the rage in basketball? I mean, there's the new rage now with the prisms and the opticolos and all these things that are coming out, this year and last year with guys like Giannis. I know he's not this year, last year, but Giannis and Zion now, of course. But when did you really get into the elusive 90s inserts that command, measurable dollars, big money, and in most cases, and are highly sought after by so many people, like investors, collectors, young and old? When did you really take a liking to those cards?
How I mentioned that I at one point was more of a flipper. Well, this thing happened in the late 90s or the early 2000s, where some of the high-end insert cards sold for a lot more than maybe people knew locally here in Salt Lake. And so every once in a while, I would get a chance to acquire something, and I had a pretty good sense of what it would sell for. This became kind of a money-making thing for me. And along the way, I realized how rare they really were, right? We would have lots of people who would bring cards into the shop. Almost never did you see one of these, Playmakers Theater, Showcase, Legacy, PMG, any of those things that you always hear about. You just didn't see them. And so as I look back at my childhood, those are the key cards of my childhood. Those are the cards that were in the Beckett that, people would make copies of and put them in the showcase and pretend that they had one, right? No one ever thought that you could actually, I never believed that I would even see a Jordan Jambalaya, let alone own a Jordan Jambalaya. And so I got older. I, started to make a little bit more money, and it became a possibility for me to own some of these things. And then I looked at where I thought the market was headed in terms of how many, people were coming into the hobby, people who didn't have money now suddenly having money. And I thought, these seem like really smart investments. So I made a lot of those investments. And then, now I sit in that place where I'm like, I like them. I don't have to sell them. And they're key and important to my collection. And so I still have most of them that I have, I've had for years though. I haven't bought them over the last year. Most of them I've had for a long time.
Yeah, you're very selective when you do add a new card to your collection, because you share the information on Instagram, and we'll get to that. That's a key part of what I want to talk about, because you do have a really unique method of how you've curated your personal collection, and I want to bring that. We have some viewers who are newer to the hobby and maybe looking to invest in certain cards, but I think they also want to collect. You used the term invest quite a few times just when you were speaking there. Can you just sort of contrast that with how you look at yourself in terms of where you are on the continuum of investor to collector?
Yeah. Even as I used it, I don't feel great about using it because I think people mean different things when they say it. I'll tell you what I mean. I think there was a time in the past where I really was very focused on making money. I don't think I'm as focused on it today. And that to me is the differentiator. I think you can be both, as one of your previous guests talked about. We can both be somebody who wants to make money and wants to collect at the same time. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, and I think that's what most of us probably ought to do if we want to better our collection all the time. But when I hear investor, I try to figure out what people are saying. What I'm saying clearly is focused on money or focused on cardboard. And now I'm very firmly in the cardboard camp.
So you've sort of moved towards the collector end of the continuum from being maybe more in the middle, or you're moving along it this way as time goes by, because you just love what you own, which I think speaks to the fact that you are a collector. I mean, you told me the other day you've been collecting since you were 4 years old. You've been doing cards. You've had cards in your life every year of your life since you were 4. So, I mean, that speaks a lot. We're just gonna say hello. Frankie 3500 is in the house. Frankie, welcome to Sports Cards Live. As always, great to have you. And I know this guest means even more to you. So thanks for tuning in. Okay, so Adam, you, in addition to being, really present on Instagram, having a great account, I think everybody should really follow it. I'm actually going to throw that up there right now, guys. So right there, if you're not already many of you are, but if you're not already following him, you can follow Adam on Instagram at @TheReal27Guy. And we're now going to talk a little bit about your podcast that's called The Basketball Card Podcast. Straight into the point. You got that name early. You're sort of a pioneer in the world of sports card podcasts and basketball card podcasts, maybe specifically. Talk a bit about that. What got you started with doing your podcast, and kind of take us through from then till now?
So I'm an accountant, and as an accountant, a lot of times I will come into work and I will work on things that I know how to do in a way that I don't actually have to use my whole brain, which is a funny thing to say, but it's true, right? Sometimes you have jobs like that you get to just kind of go through quickly. And so I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I've listened to a lot of podcasts for years. And in the middle of 2016, I'm sitting there and I realize, why in the world do we not have a basketball card podcast? This is insane. We should totally have something. It should be every week. It should discuss the current things that are happening at the time. There should be conversational pieces. And I had all of these great ideas. Here's the problem. I have a really busy job. I have a wife and 3 wonderful children. I have responsibilities with my church and other things that keep me very engaged. And my life is a busy one, but I am completely obsessive about cardboard, right? So I said, that's it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to create this thing. Around that time, though, my wife got pregnant. We had our 3rd kid. And I looked in the mirror and I said, I've got to cut something out of my life. And that's what I cut. Then over the course of the next few years, a lot of far better shows, including your own, popped up and really put everything that I ever did to shame. But the podcast is still wonderful because it gives me an outlet to just say, this is really what I think, this is really what I believe, and whether it's right or not, you can decide. But since I've got 30 years of experience in the hobby, and I am, somebody who's really passionate about it, I think it resonates with some people, and I have a lot of fun with it, and get a lot of people who write back and say, hey, I really like how you talked about X, Y, and Z, or tell me more about, this. And to your point from a previous episode, it's about educating people too. So that's kind of why we do it.
So you collect Jordan cards, you collect 90s cards, but you're also you're in Salt Lake City, Utah. You're a Utah Jazz fan through and through, lifelong. Do you collect the John Stocktons, the Karl Malones, those guys from I'm really curious about your vintage collecting, because I've seen a few vintage cards. How do you kind of balance your collection in terms of the modern guys that are really, really again, we'll use that term investment worthy, versus the guys that you want to collect because that's where your heart is, because that's your team?
So this is probably a good time to talk about the top 100. The top 100 is something that I do that is really just crazy, and I wouldn't recommend that anyone takes the amount of time on doing something with their collection the way that I do it on mine. But the idea is, I don't want to be a hoarder. I don't want to collect everything. I want to collect things that I really enjoy. I never open packs of cards. I almost never, unless somebody gives them to me, I don't open packs. So I don't end up with stuff that I don't want unless I'm buying a lot to turn and flip it, which I still do, so that I have cash flow to be able to, to buy the things that I want to. So, but the purpose of the 100 is not only to not become a hoarder, but it's to also organize my collection in a way that fills sort of every piece of what I want in a collection. So what do I want in a collection? I want some of the greats. And that's where the majority of my collection is, right? The majority of the value is Kobe, it's Jordan, and it's LeBron. But it's not like that. Those aren't the only really important cards to me. Almost everyone, if you were to name the 20 greatest players in the history of the league, almost everyone's represented. I have prospects represented, not a lot, but a couple that I really like. And then I've got some vintage cards that I think are really key and important and unusual, and that if I was to sell would be hard to come by again. So when I look at my whole of my collection, I'm always saying, what do I need to fill? What's the thing that's missing from the top 100? And one example of that is last year I looked at my list and I thought, Tim Duncan isn't on it. And Tim Duncan this is a controversial take. I think Tim Duncan's the 5th best player in the history of the game. And if he's the 5th best player in the history of the game, I darn well better have a card on the top 100 of him. So I went out and I found one, and that card's there to stay unless I replace it with another Duncan, or unless there's something that I have to move it for to go get something else.
So the top 100, it's interesting because I actually put that on Instagram and Facebook, where I sort of promoted the show for tonight. I had that as one of the kind of topics that we were going to discuss. So I want to just let people understand a bit more about what it really is. So my understanding is that the top one, your personal collection is 100 cards. Sometimes it'll go a bit higher if you haven't had time to move a few out, or it'll go a bit lower. But kind of every year, you then go through your collection, you rank your cards from 1 to 100, and then every day on Instagram for about 3 months, you post one card, you post a picture, you post a video of the card, and you go into some lengthy discussion about why it's important to you, why the card is unique, perhaps it's rarity. Why do you go through that process? And do you find that your followers on Instagram enjoy it?
I think some people really enjoy it. I think that a lot of people like things on Instagram that they have similar cards of. It sort of becomes this, if I can make somebody see that this card is cool, then my card will be worth more money, right? And so a lot of times people are liking things that they have similar cards of. I'm sure, I know some people really like the videos. I started this year just doing images, and I didn't have me talking, and I had some pretty strong feedback from a couple people who were like, Adam, this isn't good. It needs you. It needs a part of the 27 guy in it and explaining why it's important, why it fits the need. So I create the list for the reason, for all the reasons that I talked about, and also because it's like a masterful inventory tool. You are going to come across cards that you really want, that you can't afford without selling other cards. It's just going to happen. It's happened to me in the last couple of weeks, right? And so then what I get to do is I get to look at the list, which is ordered by my belief of the card's value. And I look at it and I say, what cards from this list can I live without that then can create the money to then go get the other thing that my collection needs more? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does. And if that so let's say you want to buy a card that's going to cost, I'll just use some figures here. It's going to cost $5,000, and you're going to sell 5 $1,000 cards to raise that $5,000. So now you only have 95 cards in your collection, or 96, I guess, because you have that one incoming. What do you do to fill those empty 4 spots in that top 100 list? Or do you kind of have do you actually have more than 100 cards in your collection, and you have some reserves that kind of get back into the top 100 because some other cards left?
If I'm telling you the truth, each of the 3 years I've done this, I can't get it to 100. This year I got it to 101, and I said the 101st card was an Oscar Robertson autographed rookie card. And I looked at it and I thought, I cannot cut that. That is like an amazing key card. It's an important part of the collection. I don't mind if it's number 50 or number 60, but I can't have it fall out of the top 100. So my issue is more like not having too much. I have a natural collector tendency to keep everything that I like. One other thing that I'd add is it's not just 100 cards, because I love doing sets, and I think sets are a lot of fun. And so this year I kind of implemented a new rule, which is 100 slots. And I think I've got 5 sets or partial sets on the list this year.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So that allows you to really collect a bit more and not be stuck with only 100 or 105 cards. I mean, how many mail days can you really have if you can only have 100 cards at any one time? But I think it's an interesting approach, and that's why I wanted to discuss it, because I want people out there who are watching to understand that we all approach this hobby in our own unique way. And you mentioned earlier that it's kind of what helps you not be the hoarder that you don't want to be, because it forces you to focus and it forces you to make some tough decisions, but it also causes you to manage your chip stack, if you will, your hobby bankroll, right? So I think it's a really neat approach, and I really wanted to let people know that that's one way you can do it. You don't have to collect everything. Like some of you've got 100 cards. I've got like 3,000 cards that I kind of have listed out that I consider my core collection. So it's really cool to hear that. All right, a few more comments here. Billy says, "Are there any singles you regret passing on over the years since you've been at it for years? You had to have had the chance to get some great cards that are now insanely expensive. Any kind of big fish that got away?"
Oh man, I can tell a lot of stories about cards that I have owned and sold, and cards that I just believed that would take off and I didn't purchase. I mean, there was a time where I made an offer on 5 Steph Curry exquisite rookies. Those are the ones that are numbered to 225. And I offered 700, and the guy countered me 750, and I was arrogant enough to say no. And that's one of just hundreds of examples. I own the Russell Westbrook Superfractor rookie. I sold it for $850, right? I've made lots and lots of mistakes in the name of making a couple $100. But that's what you learn as you're flipping and as you're investing and as you're trying to make money. And I don't regret those things, because those decisions allowed me to gain the capital to have the collection that I have. And I've got a nice collection, but I don't have a nice collection because I was always out spending the most money. It's been a meticulous sort of one card at a time thing. The other thing that I want to add here, you mentioned that people collect in different ways, and I think if I was to listen to a guy like me explaining how I collect, I would probably think, that guy doesn't sound very smart. He should try to sell when it's when the market's at its best. But I will tell you that my idea of not selling my best cards is why I still own cards that are worth an incredible amount of money. That I should have, according to a lot of people, cashed out when my cards were worth 2 or 3 times what I paid for them. And I just told people no. People will come along and they'll be like, "What did you pay?" And I'll tell them, and then they'll say, "Okay, I'll give you X." And my answer is just no, because I don't want to sell my best cards, because I've sold enough of my best cards Here's the best answer. I had a Wilt Chamberlain autographed rookie card. There's 3 of them in the world, and I had one of them, and I sold it, and I will never ever get that card back.
So that might be your biggest regret in terms of cards that you've let go.
I think so, man. I think so. Well, actually, no, okay, there's one more. And that is in the 2014 Eminence set, which is, not a popular set for most people. Most people don't even know what it is. Most people think it's ugly or whatever else. I love it. It's easily my favorite Panini set. Kobe Bryant had his first championship tag patch, and he signed it, and then he inscribed it 16, or he inscribed it 5 times champs, which is the number of championships that he won with the Lakers. And at the time I owned it, I wasn't the biggest Kobe fan, and now I find myself as like one of the biggest Kobe fans out there. I know who has the card. He knows that I want it. It's worth so much money. I know there's no chance I'll never own that card again. But that one, even more than the Wilt, I kick myself for life.
Yeah. Well, you might have to give up some of the top cards on your list to get a card like that back. But I mean, knowing some of the top cards that you own, you own some true whales in the hobby, like the Michael Jordan Playmakers Theater, numbered to 100. I mean, everybody that knows 90s Jordan inserts lusts for that card. I mean, it's something it's just nice to be able to see one time when you bring yours to the show type of thing. It's something that you just don't ever see. And I think a lot of us just throw our arms up and figure, hey, we won't get it. But, number one, they're tough to find. The people that own them aren't giving them up. And number two, if it comes up, you're going to have to sell your house kind of thing to pick it up. So, but I think you are smart in that you've held your cards for so long and just enjoyed the value increase. I'm like you. Why? If you sell it, you just got to go buy it again down the road, which is probably going to cost you more. So I'm with you. All right, Carlo, this is going back a few minutes. Carlo says, impressive. I've been nonstop since 1990. So you've got me by a few years. Tips his cap for sure. Your son, Aaron, says, I'm in 2 of his podcasts, as you very well should be, young Aaron. Very nice. Ralphie says, Adam, what are your thoughts on the Upper Deck college product Fleer Retro as an example?
Some of those cards are awesome. I know that Mikan has one of his better autographs from one of those sets. I know that, and I will tell you this: I'm a big believer in looking at things that are undervalued. Right, a big part of why I've been able to build the collection that I have been is not buying the number one thing on my want list, but buying the number one thing on my I think that's undervalued list. And those are 2 different types of things that I think you need to keep in your head. A few years ago, I looked at the Jordan autographs out of UD Black and Exquisite after he retired, and I compared that to his Wizards autos, and they were worth way less than the Wizards autos. And I thought, if I was just a guy who wanted a Jordan autograph, would I want him in his Wizards uniform or his UNC uniform? And to me, it's a no-brainer. I'd rather have a UNC auto of Jordan. And that I'm telling the truth when I say that, because now I actually own a Wizards auto of Jordan, and I don't own a UNC one. So why would I pump something that I don't have? But I think that there's some room there. The other thing that I'd say about that is, if you look back to the mid-90s, some of the great stars that you'd like to get an autograph of in their rookie years with old autographs that they haven't signed for 20-something years, some of those cost almost nothing compared to what their autographs are today. Guys like Garnett and Kobe and Duncan, you can get 20-something-year-old autographs for pennies on the dollar for what you pay for later autographs than that, just because they're in their NBA uniform. So I don't know if they're not probably on anyone's top. I've got to have that list, but I think they're probably near the top of I think that could be pretty underrated list.
And let's face it, in the United States, there are a lot of college basketball fans, a lot of loyal alumni from their schools that collect their players. So I think there's definitely a market for it. But for someone like myself or yourself, who is a fan of the Utah Jazz, an NBA team, myself, college high school basketball means nothing to me up here in Calgary, Alberta. But the NBA is special. So I'd be leaning more towards not adding those to my collection and wanting the professional team uniforms on them. What were you wanting to jump in?
Yeah, so I do want to address, he mentioned specifically Fleer Retro. I had this year 3 cards on my top 100 from Fleer Retro. And what I like being able to say about each of them, I've actually moved a couple of them to buy one of the big cards that I had to buy a couple weeks ago. But the one that I still have is the Allen Iverson Credentials. And it's numbered to 9. And I love to be able to say, I think this is his very best card in a Hoyas uniform.
Yeah.
And, that's kind of cool. Like, I'm not going to ever own the best Allen Iverson Philadelphia 76ers card because he's got an incredible following. But they've gained traction. There's some precious metals cards tonight that are ending, that are going higher than I thought they would, and they've definitely been on an upward trajectory. So I don't know how to say his name. Stamatis.
Ralphie. Call him Ralphie.
Ralphie. I think Ralphie's asking an interesting question that other people are asking right now too.
Yeah. No, I hear you. What I've seen a few times actually recently on Instagram is people are pairing the actual 90s PMG licensed card with the 2012 Fleer Retro unlicensed or college licensed card. So that's cool. You know, there's a reason to do that for sure. And the Jordan, the LeBron PMGs from that 2012 Fleer Retro, they can hit well into the 5 digits pretty quickly. All right. And I do like this discussion because we're going to go to some more comments, but it's a good segue into the way you approach the hobby, which the way you approach the cards you collect. And we'll come to it, but basically, before I'll tease it a little bit, you don't collect cards that you consider to be commodity cards, the cards that you can go onto eBay and buy any day of the week. The Topps Chromes, the Prisms, the Prism Silvers, the refractors. You like really rare cards. So we're going to come back to that in a minute. Let's just go to a few more comments here. Amit says, they say when you want something done, give it to the busiest people. Those are the ones who take the chances and it works out. So he hears what he's picking up what you're putting down. Jake says, yep, I'm right there with you. Create content and share your knowledge. That's a comment back about the podcast. So everyone, thank you for doing that. I love your podcast. I listen to it. And that's where I got some of the questions I have and the topics for tonight, actually. Paul says the 100 list. I love it. Yeah, I mean, ways to think about changing how you collect, augmenting how you collect, just refocusing. Just, we're not saying go collect 100 cards. We're saying you have options. You don't have to buy everything. Be calculated. Be smart with what you're buying. The 100 list is quite the challenge, quite difficult. Yeah. Ralph, and if you should be following Adam on Instagram by now. If you're not, and you can see it, you're in the middle of one of these right now, because every year you redo this. It gives you your opportunity to refocus and make sure that you know what you've got, you love what you've got. If anything has sort of fallen out of favor, you can now sell it to bring in something new. And to me, it's like I said to you the other night, your collection, it's got its kind of its foundation, but it's kind of got a little bit of in and out here every so often. And that's what keeps it interesting, right? I think that's so cool. Amit says, kind of like doing Marie Kondo approach to your collection. I don't know what that means, Amit. Brett says, constant refining and quasi limitations. Fantastic. Love the creative approach to the parameters to your PC. Anonymous Facebook user says, love your countdown list on Blowout, Adam. What is the toughest card you've ever gotten rid of? You want to throw out a single card that's the toughest one?
Yeah, I think we hit it on the head earlier with that Kobe Eminence card. I especially now where I consider myself a Kobe collector and I didn't at the time, it just stings even worse. It encapsulates his career, the Lakers franchise. And although I'm not a Lakers fan and I hated when they played my Jazz, like you have to respect Kobe Bryant and how he played and what he did for the game. And I listen, to obviously, he's gone, but I listen to his words and watch the tapes and the highlights now. And I find myself being more of a fan every day.
Awesome. Okay. To the person whose comment this is, I just put on the ticker at the bottom. Please don't be an anonymous Facebook user. Go to StreamYard.com/Facebook and click the big blue button. That way we can recognize you and address you more directly. It just makes for a much more comfortable episode. Or you can just watch through YouTube and I can address you by your YouTube account name. And I'll just mention now, if you're new to Sports Cards Live, if Adam brought you here to watch tonight because you are a follower of his on Instagram, you love what he's doing, please consider subscribing to Sports Cards Live. This is episode number 26. There's 25 other episodes in the library, in the archive. They are long. Watch them in bits and pieces here and there. YouTube will remember where you left off last time. And you know what? I think maybe now I'll sort of announce who my the guest that I just lined up today for episode number 30, which will be occurring on July the 22nd. I'm really excited about this. I thought, this is somebody I'd love to have on the show. And he's a guy that, I'd like to tie him into a special episode because he's really a special guy in the hobby. He's someone we all know. Well, we all know about. Everybody watching knows this person. And so the guest on episode number 30 that I am super, super proud, honored, excited to have join me will be none other than maybe the most recognizable name in the whole hobby, Dr. James Beckett, the man whose name is on the price guides that we have been buying and reading since the mid to late 80s. I mean, I've got all the first 10 hockey issues, I got the Jordan issues, the early ones, the Barry Sanders issues, all those early ones. So I am so excited to have Dr. Beckett on the show for episode number 30. That is going to be just a true honor. And he's a hobby legend. I don't know any name in the hobby that has the recognition that he does. Any name at all. I mean, the athletes don't count. So anyway, I'm super stoked, super pumped about that. What an honor it'll be. And big thank you to Dr. Beckett. If you happen to be watching right now, thank you for accepting my invitation. That was a cold call. I did have to cold call him and ask him to come on. And he got back to me within 30 minutes and said, sounds good to me. Thank you for the invitation. And I'd like to repay the favor and have you as a guest on my podcast. So Dr. Beckett has a podcast that you can listen to on all the podcast platforms as well as on YouTube. So I don't know when, but eventually, actually, I know we're going to record it the night before we do our show, Sports Cards Live episode number 30. And I don't know when he'll actually drop that episode, but I'm looking forward to hearing myself on his show and, of course, doing the episode with him. Truly an honor. Okay. Frankie says, can always send more MJs my way for more funds. Frankie's a big MJ collector. Zach says, how do you balance things like set/best card / current card value / potential future value when selecting a card for your collection? That's a good question. Can you speak to that, Adam?
Honestly, Zach's question is the best question because so let me just give an example. Okay. So a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I became aware that there was a Steph Curry gold 2012 Prism card that was available. And this was a card that I really, really wanted. But remember, I only have cards in my collection that I really like. So when you have to then make the decision of which cards to, and it's amongst a bunch of cards that you really love, and in a lot of them, you believe that they have high future value. It's just really difficult. I mean, there's not a great way to do it, but you have to. That's when the whole idea of like the top 100 comes in because Frankie said send me some more Jordans. I did send Frankie a Jordan, and it wasn't a card that I felt good about moving. I didn't want to sell it. It was in my top like 60 or 65, so it's a significant card. But like I had another Jordan gold card, and so I felt some level of okay, I can let that go. It might go up 10 times what it's worth right now, but I'm not going to try to guess what's going to go up because I find out that I'm wrong a lot of the time. And the market moves in ways that aren't always logical. I work for a private equity firm and our job is to make good investments. And so I hear lots of talk about good investments and bad and what makes things go up and down. And the thing that it brings to light to me is that our hobby is totally nonsensical. It really is. It does not rationally make sense in a lot of cases, especially when you're looking at the short term. You look at the short term of how things go up and down, good luck. It doesn't make any sense because you have such a small number of players who can make such a huge difference. And actually they can make a huge difference in the long term too. So I don't have any idea, Zach, how to tell whether something's going to go up or down, but I do know what's most important in my collection. And so when I think about that, I'd say, okay, I'm gonna try to build it to the best capacity, and I'm gonna not think so much about what's gonna go up because I'm gonna trade cards that are gonna go up in value because I only buy cards that I think are gonna go up in value.
All right, man. Awesome explanation. I teased it earlier. I do want to come back to discussing the whole concept between like commodity cards versus, commodity / high volume cards versus true rarity when it comes to your collection. I think that's a discussion that a lot of people want to hear. Before we get to that, Rodman just wants you to tell everybody that you once shared the court with the Honduran Ricky Rubio. Brett knew what a meat meant. I still don't. If someone could let me know, I might feel like I'm more in the loop here. Ask him MJ card in his PC. What MJ card in your PC would be the last one you would ever sell? You think about it. We're going to move on. There's a reference I wasn't expecting today. I still don't know what that reference was. I am his son. Of course, his son is his favorite card. Billy has to be Gary V. I'm trying to get Gary V, but Gary V hasn't responded to my hashtags, my private messages, anything yet. So I'm confident. I think we'll get Gary V eventually, maybe episode 50. We'll see. All right. Yeah, very nice. I think this is all on Dr. Beckett joining the show on episode number 30. Thank you very much. Thank you guys for that. Zach, Carlos, Brett, Jason, that will be a cool episode. My first Beckett was the early 90s one with Gretzky on the cover. Yeah, I think everybody in hockey had that magazine at one point or another. Okay, so back to Rodman's questions now. Which is the last one you would ever sell? I guess the similar questions. What is your favorite MJ in your personal collection? You've had some time to think about this now.
I hate this question. I hate it because I don't know how to get to one. I don't know how. I know
he barely gets to 100. How is he going to get to one, Rodman?
I don't know how to get to one. I think in my top 10, I think I've got 4 maybe 5 that are in the top 10. And I know which ones I think is the most valuable. There's 2 that are really tied. I got his PMG championship. That's a 9 and it's beautiful. It's incredible. And I've got his Gold Fusion, which is literally his rarest insert card. I think about inserts and parallels differently, right? I think a parallel is an insert, but like I say, I kind of divide the 2 out, and so the Gold Fusion is Jordan's rarest. But I'll tell you, and I don't think Rodman's gonna like this answer, but I think the last card of my Jordans that I'll sell will be the Slam Bams. It's numbered to 100, but I don't believe that. I think it might be the rarest, if we're really honest. It may be not the rarest by serial number, but as far as how often they pop up, it doesn't pop up ever.
Isn't the Fusion numbered to 40?
It is, and it's the other one that might be the rarest. Those are the 2. But the Slam Bams, I believe that a lot of the hoops, and I would like you to ask Jim this. By the way, my level of being totally jealous of you that you get to interview him is like through the roof right now. I am so jealous that you get to.
I'm jealous of me too, man. I can't even believe it. I mean, the 15-year-old me in the 80s is like blown away right now by the fact that he said yes to me today to coming on the show. So, yeah, I think I'm just really pleased. I can't even. It's almost it's unbelievable. I think for your Jordan cards, the ones that I would like to own the most are the Fusion and the Playmakers Theater. To me, those are the 2 most important ones. And I think, to me, I like the looks, the aesthetics of them the most. The Slam Bams, cool card. I just like the other 2 more for myself.
Can I jump in?
Please.
This will foreshadow something we're going to talk about later, but the Playmakers Theater is by far and away more iconic than the Slam Bams. Right? We've all heard of the Slam Bams, but you kind of have to think about what it looks like for a second before you get there in your mind, whereas the Playmakers Theater comes to you instantly, if you're like me.
Yeah.
But you will see 3 or 4 Playmakers Theaters before you will ever see a Slam Bams. It's a far rarer card. It just is. And so for me, like I look at that thing and I say, I know that one of them's more iconic. I'm actually not sure which one would sell for more at open auction. And I know some people are like, come on, Adam, it's not even close. I actually think it's pretty close. But I would tell you this, and this might surprise you, Jeremy. The number one, and this is a note for Rodman, the number 1 card in my collection that I get asked about is 100% the Slam Bams. No question.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, people that know the depth of the 90s inserts and parallels like you do, like Rodman does, I mean, you guys know what you're talking about. I'm still a rookie when it comes to this stuff, a true amateur when it comes to 90s basketball cards. I am, in terms of my knowledge base. I've picked up a lot in the last couple of years, but there's still so much I don't need. There's cards that show up that I've never seen before still. So that's why it's great to know people like you. Another benefit of the community, and the online community in particular, is guys like Adam are willing to answer your questions, help you out, guide new people into the hobby. I mean, this brings us to what is supposed to be the last point in our discussion tonight, but is basically educating others, welcoming people into the hobby, using our knowledge, our experience, our cards to help ingratiate new people into the hobby and make them not only feel welcome, but give them a bit of a head start, so they're not going to they're not going to have expensive, they're not going to pay expensive lessons by making mistakes early and buying cards that may be overpriced, but didn't hold a commensurate amount of value for that price at that time. I hope that came out good. Anyway, okay. Brett says that it was a Netflix on decluttering. Thanks, Brett. That makes a lot of sense now. And your son, Adam, your son's favorite card is the precious metal gems. Yeah, I don't doubt it. Rodman says, I would say the 27 guy is far more famous than Dr. Beckett. On Instagram, he might be. Carvin Chung of GTS says, has to be cards you like the best. And I mean, Carvin, thanks for saying that, because that is true. That's like the mantra. That's what, I've been setting up the expo for 15 years. The viewers know that by now. But about probably 5 years ago, I changed my booth name and banner to collect what you like. That's just what it says. It's not a name. It's not the name of my business, my store, nothing. It's just a message to people. Collect what you like. That whatever you want to look at the most, you should collect. And if you can marry that with a card that has value and room to go up in value, then you're going to kind of do yourself that favor on the financial side of things as well as owning cards that you love to have, to share with your friends, to show on Instagram and all that sort of thing. Yeah, and Aaron clarifies the blue one. All right. Brett says, do you consider rarity when moving a card out of your top 100 when bringing in a new item? So listen, let's get to this piece now. Great segue from Brett. Let's talk a bit about the difference between and why you focus on true rare cards that are of a true rarity versus high volume / commodity cards. And what do you even mean by high volume or commodity cards?
So let me preface this by saying what you said earlier, buy what you like, is definitely a tagline that I live by, and is something that I've talked about for a long time. When I worked at the card shop, I would have people ask me a question that has never made sense. It was, what should I buy? And people ask this question a lot. What should I buy? There is no question. You should buy what you like. Unless you're here just for the investment thing, then there's a million people who are going to tell you what you should invest in. But there's a chance that all of this stuff is going to go to zero and be worthless, right? I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, but it could happen. And if it did, it'd be sure a shame if the thing that you were holding at the end was a bunch of stuff that you didn't even like. And so at least if everything goes to zero, you should have what you like. So how does that relate to this idea of like buying rare cards? Well, I love the chase. And I don't understand even how, and I don't want to shape how people buy. That's something that I'm really sensitive to. I don't want to tell anyone, go buy this or don't buy that, because then I'd be talking out of both sides of my mouth. I don't get to say, go buy what you like and buy this stuff. You can't do both those things. That's disingenuous. You can say, buy what you like, and then these are things that I think are smart buys. So maybe that's what I'm saying. But for me personally, I love the chase, right? I just told you that my favorite card, maybe of all my Jordans, is the card that comes up the least often and that a lot of people are after. I love the chase. So when I look at my collection and I see cards that are rare, well, there's a lot of one-on-ones that aren't worth anything. So, and you can't get rarer than a one-of-one, right? So it needs to be both rare and really important. I've heard people say in various places recently that iconic wins, that iconic beats rarity. I think that's probably true in the short term. Rarity matters. Rarity will always matter. When you make 1 million cards of a card in 1989, the Ken Griffey Jr. rookie, and it's the most popular card maybe we've seen in our lifetimes, it still isn't going to be worth $1 million because they made so much of it. And people will say, oh, the laws of supply and demand, they don't work right now. Okay, maybe in the short term, funny things happen and people buy up a whole bunch of stuff or whatever. In the long term, Rarity wins. And more importantly than the financial side of it, owning something where you can say, I'm the only one who owns this, and it's important, and let me tell you why. I'll give you an example. Today on the top 100 list, I showed off a UD Black autograph card. It's called an Octograph from 2008. It's numbered to 5, and it's got 8 autographs on it, as the card implies. The 8 autographs are from 8 Boston Celtics that played in the 1950s and the 1960s. Most of the people who are listening to this don't care about that, but that's the most significant dynasty maybe in the history of professional sports. And that card has 55, it represents 55 championship rings on one card. That's like history. That's a piece of history on a piece of cardboard. And I know, Jeremy, you're not a huge autograph guy, but like you have to see that and think about that and go, goodness, that's really neat. That's like really important. And the fact that that is at the same value as like a card that's out there that there's thousands of copies of in that same grade does not make sense to me at all. And so for me, you can tell which thing matters more and which thing I appreciate more. I will always go towards that rare, important thing more than the thing that's hype. The thing that's hype, I genuinely just don't have time for.
And you can get it anytime on eBay, I think is the other thing for you. You want the stuff that you just can't go get anytime because it just comes back down to the fact that it's truly rare. A little bit earlier, you made the comment that, it's hard to say to somebody, I think you should buy this, but buy what you like. I think I had a thought that ran through my head that specific moment I think what you can say to people is that here's something that you might like. I don't know what you're going to like. I'm not in your brain. I don't walk in your shoes, but here's some cards that you might like. And the more we get to know our fellow collectors and our friends in the hobby, you kind of get to know their taste, and maybe it will allow us to make more specific recommendations that are maybe, you might like this. It's got an element of rarity, but it's also, got an element of value too. So I think we can all be doing that for our friends in the hobby. Frankie agree. And Frankie is a Michael Jordan expert, says, I agree. Slam Bams shows up far less frequently than the Playmaker. So it's interesting, right? I mean, maybe they didn't all make it out into the packs back in the day. Ziggy says, why is 90s basketball not considered junk wax? Was there junk basketball wax now that everything Jordan is worth money? When was the first basketball auto and RPA cards? Thank you. So I'll let you, Adam, take the second part about when was the first basketball auto, relic, and RPA cards. But I will just mention that, there was junk basketball wax in the early 90s. I mean, the first Upper Deck basketball with the Dikembe Mutombo card, that was a monster card. The Larry Johnson, those cards were monsters back in 1992 when that came out. Nowadays, you can buy a box of that for $5 or $10, at a card show. So there is junk wax from back then. And if you follow the basketball 90s market, the high-end stuff, the valuable stuff, really you don't have truly valuable cards until around 94, 95, when Topps Chrome started coming out, and then inserts became all the rage. And then it really peaked in 1997 with the artists from Arena Design who have made appearances on House of Jordans in the past. So I recommend checking, on Cardboard Chronicles, Josh's channel. I recommend watching that. He had a great interview with the people that were the artists that behind all these really interesting 90s inserts and cards and base cards, even in all sports. So really cool stuff. Carvin says, I only like MJ auto cards because his auto is classic. Hey man, you don't like him because they're just, it's cool to have them, Carvin, or because it's Michael Jordan? It's all of the above, right? It's all of the above for sure. And Carvin, if you don't know anybody, people that watching don't know, Carvin worked for Upper Deck. He invented Exquisite. He invented hockey's The Cup. And then he went on to work for Panini, and now he works for GTS Distribution out of the United States. Jake says, Ziggy, 89, here we go. 89 to 93 or 94 would be the junk wax era for basketball. Only a couple of inserts are exceptions to that. Sorry, I skipped ahead of the other stuff. Adam, can you let everybody, including Ziggy, know when were the first basketball auto, relic, and RPA cards released?
Yeah, so the first basketball autograph that comes to my mind is 1991 Fleer. That's Dominique Wilkins and Dikembe Mutombo, if I remember right. The next few years, Fleer sort of picked a player each year that they'd focus on. One year it was Pippen, one year it was Drexler, one year it was Malone, and that's how it started. But the first real like autograph sets that were larger and more of the NBA, probably the autographic sets in 1996. As far as RPA, that's going to get to another question that you've talked about, which is the differentiation between patch and autograph. And RPA stands for rookie patch autograph. And there is a distinct difference between rookie jersey autographs and rookie patch autographs. That there always has been a distinction between those two. The first RPA, I believe, is 2001 Ultimate Collection, which is an unfortunate year to have started that. The autographs skip a little bit. They're a little bit bubbly. And the rookie class that year is the great, Kwame Brown, Tyson Chandler, Eddie Curry, Zagana Diop, Jason Richardson. It's unfortunately a really bad year for them to have started, but they did 25 each.
Okay, cool. Jake goes on to explain here that to Ziggy, between 89 and 93 or 94, that would be the junk wax era for basketball. Only a couple of inserts are the exceptions to that. So pretty much corroborating what I was thinking and said earlier, but certainly not the expert that these guys are. So thanks for jumping in with that, Jake. Glenn says, I like LA Kings Day with the cup cards, but hard to get one of each player when I need 12 more to complete my collection. Fair enough. Paul says, I worked at a local card shop, and that was the most asked question. Awesome. Your son loves the card. Awesome to keep it in the family. Carvin says, my favorite MJ is the autograph front back reflections auto. I did this since MJ is the GOAT and only he can sign it. It was the first dual signed of the same player. Just awesome to have a guy like Carvin, first of all, watching the show, making comments, because he decided that card was going to go into that set and made sure it got made. So we've got one of the architects, and Carvin is the architect of really the card sets that ushered in the high-end world, really. I mean, the 90s were a different thing. Upper Deck as a whole was the high-end thing in 1989-90 when it first came out with that little hologram on the back and colored pictures in that new card stock. But true high-end didn't really come out until Exquisite came out in 2003 for basketball, followed up by 2005, the Cup for hockey. So, and he goes on to say that's from 03-04 Upper Deck Reflection. So really cool stuff. Really good to know. He also says, my favorite combo auto I could never design is Mookie Blaylock signing with all of Pearl Jam members. Pearl Jam was originally called Mike Blaylock. That's hilarious. Did not know that, right? The trivia we find out on Sports Cards Live. Love it, Carvin. Thanks for the comments. It's all junk wax. The inserts were impossible to hit, which is why they are so valuable. One of the cool things I'll point out, when I first got into the 90s Jordan insert world, I found this thread on Blowout that basically these guys had laid out for you what the pack hit odds were for all of these cards. And then they'd rank them like, here's one that's 1 in 40,000, 1 in 20,000. Those are tough odds, right? And that's not the odds of hitting a card from that subset. That's the odds of hitting the Michael Jordan. So you might have hit another card in that particular subset before you hit the Jordan, which is why these numbers are so big, right? So I used that thread to help me decide what cards were important. And then I took that list of important cards and I compared it to cards that I wanted to look at for the rest of my life. And that cross section, that Venn diagram, what ended up in the middle became what is now, I have many of those in my collection at this time because I went out and I made the moves to acquire those cards. Ziggy says, is there any good sealed wax from the mid 90s that you would recommend ripping for fun? Is there sealed wax with jambalaya cards? Adam, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that sealed wax for the longest time was this really great place to go, spend your money because there was a chance to get some of these things and the prices weren't just insane. They've always been a lot, but like now at this point, just to buy a box of 97 EX 2001, which Ziggy was, I think, what you're talking about for the original jambalaya, you're spending thousands of dollars for a chance, and you're not going to get that card. They were 1 in 720 packs. I think EX it was a 24 pack box. Jake could probably correct me on that. you're gonna buy 30 boxes of that to get one at this point. You're gonna spend 30 grand to pull a jambalaya, and then it's got a 1 in 15 shot of being MJ.
Right. So 15 times 720 being the odds of pulling the Michael Jordan jambalaya, which is why that card now sells well into the 5 digits. Okay. Carvin he makes a point here. The 0102 Ultimate, I think he is saying, is not the first RPA. The first RPA as a rookie card is 03 Exquisite. So I'm sure there might be some details there that might distinguish one from being a true RPA. Maybe it was an insert, not part of the base set, therefore removing the RC designation.
I'll just add real quick. Carvin's right as far as the true rookie. That means the base card. I think that we can probably, but this is a parallel. A 2001 Ultimate it was a parallel to the rookie. I would still classify that as an RPA because it's not an insert. It was a parallel off the base set. So that's a little bit different to me, but that's a semantics thing.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Then Ziggy says, Carvin, would love to have you on the show and hear more. Thank you for the amazing products. Exquisite was the best and most fun to rip. Yeah, agree. It's quite the product. And Carvin, I mean, Carvin was my first guest ever on Sports Cards Live. So definitely holds a special place for me, Carvin. That was early on. I think the show's come a bit of a long way since then. So Carvin, we're probably due to get you back on here. I'm going to reach out. We'll schedule you for a second appearance. I would love to get you back, man, and really dive in some more into that that sports card set architecture brain of yours. He says a variation, sort of confirming that. So, okay. So, I mean, I want to repeat a quote. This is one of your quotes, Adam, that I heard listening to the Basketball Card podcast. It goes back to how we collect. And basically you said that each collection is art itself, building a collection around an idea versus a set. And I love that comment because that's what I do. I mean, and that's what, I do collect some sets here and there, but I in a way I have my top 100, but it's really, like I said before, it's a top 3,000, which is a staggering number. But there's people watching that have 1 million cards, right? That have hundreds of thousands. So what's 3,000? It's all relative, I guess. And it's kind of what you enjoy. And I don't know who has time to look at 1 million cards or 100,000 cards. I don't even have time to look at 3,000, but I managed to look at them on screen once in a while. I thought that was just a really interesting comment. And if, to the viewers, anyone watching out there, like let's hear how you collect, in a succinct manner. So if I bring your comment up on screen, it's not going to cut off our chins, but please do let us know. Does that kind of hit home with you? Does it make you think about how you collect that? When a set, it's one thing about sets I don't like, Adam, is that I don't pick that checklist. So if I want to collect all the essential credentials or all the hot shots or all the jambalayas, and I'm talking about, more modern cards where you can actually put these sets together still, I don't necessarily want to be forced or feel like I'm forced to buy a card of a player or a look that I just don't want because it's in the checklist with other cards that I do want. So I completely hear it. I almost wish I could customize all the checklists myself, right? Because that way I could collect a set, know it's done, and not need any more. And in the past, I was a set collector, and I've got several. And now I'm thinking, I guess my approach is I don't collect sets so much. There's a few I do, but generally speaking, if I collect 2 or 3 cards from a set because I like those players, I don't anymore feel the need to go fill in the rest of those 17 other cards of players I don't care about just because I already got the 3 best cards in the set, sort of thing. And I hear that comment all the time. People say, I've already got these 3. I may as well finish the set now. Well, okay, but do you really like those cards? It comes back to collect what you like. Anything you can add on to that, Adam? And we were getting some comments coming in, so we'll go to that. But does that sum it up for you, or any other sort of pieces of information on that?
Yeah, I think you've just hit it on the head. I would tell you that I saw it a different way, but the idea that you can say, what do I want my whole collection to look like, and what do I want it to represent? And my idea that I want it to represent, as I mentioned earlier, is the history of the game of basketball. So you can bet that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain are in my top 100. You can also bet that the cards or the players that I've cared about most from my lifetime are more prevalent. And the fact that I don't need to go get something based on what somebody else, has dictated would be in a set. That's Jeremy. That's a good point. The only caveat that I'd add to that is, like you, I'm a real fan of design and a fan of rarity and things that are really like different and unusual. Like a set can catch my eye, and almost if there was a player in the set that I had never heard of, I still might go get it because I like the idea of owning that thing, that set, and having a place for that for me is important. But I don't think that you should go out and buy things that you don't like just to put together a set. You should buy what you do like, and then, like I said, for me, it's just something that's going to constantly build forever. Let's say Luka ends up being one of the best 5 players of all time. I don't own a Luka card right now. I'm going to have to get one at that point.
Yeah.
I have to get one because I can't have one of the best players of all time only having like the number 95 card on my list. It's got to be higher than that.
And that's because you want your collection to represent the history of the game. So if someone moves into that top 5, they've earned their spot in your collection. The other thing about this, the comment about buying that card in that set that you have the player you've never heard of or don't care to own, there's a lot of people listening that are saying, no, I'm buying that card. I want to complete that set. I mean, we've all been there. I've been there myself too. I've recently stopped because there's only so many cards that you can add. But I think the other thing is that, anyone out there who feels that way still, but wishes they didn't, send me a message, make a comment, let's talk. We can provide counseling for that. I think there's a need for that, for people to help them kind of reshape the way they approach or just kind of look through that lens a little bit differently as to what they're looking for. Okay, a couple comments from a few minutes ago. Jake says, haha, there's always a chance Ziggy ripping is fun, but the ROI is brutal, especially for 90s wax these days. So that's a good advice. Brett says, great comment. All collections are art. I love the creativity and uniqueness that can be explored. Definitely. Billy says, I don't think anyone ripping old product is seriously factoring in ROI. The odds are usually astronomical to pull anything of value. There are no guarantees that the cards will be in good condition. Great point. And I'll add that I think when people are ripping some of that old wax, it's a treat. They're doing it as a Christmas time sort of thing. It's a gamble, though. It's a gamble. It's that thrill of opening up a product that is over 20 years old with the minute chance of hitting the jackpot. And if you do, what a story. Make sure you're capturing that on video, right? I'll also mention Billy has a channel on YouTube called Cardboard Nostalgia, where all he does really is rip old hockey products, but not old as in 80s or earlier, more like 90s and forward, even some early 2000s stuff that is just really rare and tough to find that a lot of people would love to be breaking. So you can watch his channel to see those products being ripped. I recommend you check that out. Amit says, I don't have patience to build sets. I get nuts about a certain set. I have too many cards that I chase, so I've cut down to what tickles my fancy only now. Yes, Amit has some Upper Deck Supreme patch cards. I think he's probably got 500 of them by now. And I've seen him just kind of show me, hey, look what I got at the show today. He hands them to me like, you don't even know what's in this handful, do you? He's like, no idea. Just bought them. Didn't even look at them. Just bought them. Ernie says, Ernie, welcome to the show. I collect only what I like. Don't follow trends. O-Peachy hockey. Yeah, O-Peachy hockey, for those basketball guys watching, is kind of like, it's the bread and butter of vintage hockey. Vintage being from really 1968 to 1990 or so, with some earlier sets in the 30s as well, which is pretty interesting. So great eye, Ernie, great eye. Brett says, I built a this is cool. I remember this. I built a 1 versus 100 set years ago. So Adam, you'll find this interesting. He had a card that was serial numbered out of 1, a card serial numbered out of 2, all the way up to 100 for no reason other than it had never been done. I mean, sometimes, and I think that's neat because there are times when you're a true collector and hobbyist when whatever is being released may not be interesting to you. You may be going through a bit of a rut. So you need to invent something to keep yourself interested. And Brett's a guy I've known for a long time. So I believe that's what was kind of happening. Is like, I need a project to keep me in the hobby right now. And when that happens to you, I mean, with the multitude of cards out there, we have the ability, the luxury that all these companies have given us over the years by producing so many sets with all these parallels and variations and serial numbers. You can find something to keep yourself interested if you ever do find it going stale. Frankie says, love set building, but very picky. I do like historically important sets like 61 Fleer, 86 Fleer, first autographic set, limited sets. I agree with that 100%. Important sets are a little bit different. I think, in hockey, for us hockey guys, the 51 Parkhurst, the 1990 Upper Deck set, the 2005 Cup set, the pre-war stuff, like those are important sets that have a different, I think when I say I don't collect sets anymore, it's more like insert sets from current years where I might want the Gretzky, the Crosby, and the Ovechkin, but I don't care about the other guys in the set, so I'm not chasing them. But great comment, Frankie. Love that. Carvin says there is a fine balance of insert cards. It's always supply versus demand. Products that over-deliver the inserts will devalue the cards. Panini has done a great job with the color blasts in Spectra. So this is coming from a guy who has built card sets for a living and now sells cards to retailers and breakers and all that for a living. So he knows what's what in the hobby. So really heed his words. That's coming from really a place of knowledge. So thanks for that, Carvin, for sharing your knowledge and your experience with the viewers. Rodman says, the thing is a collection always evolves. The availability of cards is a main issue when building a PC, especially with rare 90s stuff. Upgrading is a natural process of every collection. Yeah, I mean, I know some people that don't necessarily need to upgrade, but then again, you find them upgrading later on. I think that's a great comment. And Rodman, just for people watching who don't know this guy, Rodman lives in Nicaragua, right? Nicaragua? No, Honduras. Sorry, Honduras. Rodman lives in Honduras, and I've never been to South America. I don't know what Honduras is like, but I picture a guy sitting in his house, balmy weather with all these Jordan cards, and when most of the hobbyists that he rubs shoulders with and communicates with are up in the US and a few of us in Canada. So Rodman, just great comment. Thank you for watching and viewing. And it's just neat to be able to, and I said to Rodman after meeting him at the National last year, I said, I'm like, where can I vacation in Honduras? He told, there's the beautiful, beautiful vacation spots. I said, well, you know what? Back then, before COVID, I said, maybe one day I'll bring my family. We'll come to Honduras for a vacation instead of going to Mexico or a Hawaii or somewhere like, or Arizona type of thing. But anyway, Rodman, great guy. Thanks for watching. Amit says, so true, Jeremy. I'm curious, and I may have missed this. What criteria requires you to refactor the list? Well, this is to you, Adam. You want to just kind of sum that up because we did sort of touch it again, but let Amit know why you do change your top 100?
Yeah, so I do it once every year so that I can kind of fulfill some of those things that I talked about. I don't want to be a hoarder. I want to see, I want to have a good idea of what the value is. And so I order it by value. Some people don't like that. Some people are very uncomfortable with that. They want you to just, order it in a way that's like what's important to you. But like I was saying earlier, if I'm trying to build up my collection, having it in order of value allows me to then say what is worth the most that matters the least to my collection. And that's hard to do. But then every year I go back into it and I look at it. And the funny thing is that a lot of things change the list that have nothing to do with me, right? So for me, if I'll give you an example. Last year, I had a LeBron James 2012 Silver Prism, and it was ranked at like 95 or something like that. Now it's like it's probably like the hottest card of the year. It's probably the card that has like the best story with it, or at least one of those cards that's one of the cards of the year. And it's going to find its way into the top 20. And I wouldn't have ever guessed that. I certainly didn't pay what I would have paid for the other cards that are in the top 20, but that's how the market has changed. And I have to kind of reflect that in my collection. That doesn't mean that it's my 15th favorite. It means or 20th favorite or whatever it'll be, but it doesn't mean that it's that high on the value list.
And ranking them in terms of value versus your favorite, it's just more objective and easier. Like you have to do your research, but at least it's easier than I could never rank my cards from. People always say to you, what's the last card you'll sell? Like you said earlier when it was asked, you hate that question. I can't answer that question. It's like, what's the last 500 cards I'd sell? Because I can't narrow it down to 1 or 5 or 10 or probably even 100, maybe 100. So pretty funny. Okay. Josh says, the way he collects, I'm a player collector who puts cards in 4-row boxes for storage, nice and simple. The question is, how many players do you collect? Is it, oh, it might just be one. And then how many 4-row boxes have you managed to fill up so far? Peter says, Jeremy, you finished a set for me, the auto patch set team from Canada Olympic Hockey Gold Medal winners 2010. Then I framed them up, Duncan Keith SP Authentic patch auto and Seabrook Cup rookie. Peter, I do remember those cards. I remember selling those to you a few years ago. And what's cool about this set that Peter put together is it wasn't a set from a checklist. He actually took a team. It's more like a PSA set registry set where he said, listen, this team, these are the players that played on the 2010 Olympic hockey gold set for Canada. I'm going to go get one card of each of them. And the cool thing was that he could pick whatever card he wanted. He picked the card that looked the best. When I offered up a Duncan Keith card that he thought looked beautiful because it had a wicked Chicago Blackhawks patch, that's the card that made his personal customized checklist. Again, if you didn't hear that, guys, that's a great way to collect. You know, you can pick your favorite team of the year they won the championship or whatever, the year you remember the most, the year you went to the most games with your dad or your mom or whatever, took your young child for the first time, and go buy one card of each of those players. Doesn't matter what the card is, the card that you like the best. Paul really liked Brett's idea of the 1 versus 100. Yep, Brett confirms what I said. You wanted to keep things fresh and just have something really to chase. Billy says, were there any MJ 101 specifically in the 90s? What is considered the definitive, hardest to find, most valuable NBA insert from that decade? Not including high-grade rookies. I mean, it's got to be the PMG greens. No doubt, right?
Well, there are a couple of 101s. There are a few. Nat Turner owns, it seems, basically all of these cards. But there's 2 years of Flair Showcase where there's masterpieces. There's an ultra masterpiece. There's also, and this is kind of a weird set, but there's a set that came out in 1998 called Hardcourt. Or it's Hardcourt? I should know this because I've owned some of them, but they have a set that's called Holding Court in them, an insert set, and the insert set has various levels, a level to 2300, 230, 23, and then a level to 1, and each of those cards has MJ on one side and another player on the other side. There's 30 of them, I believe, and those are all 1-of-1s. So if you count those as 1-of-1s, which is a little bit funky because there's 30 MJs with 30 different players on them, and then you add in the others, there's probably close to 40 1-of-1 MJs from when he was playing. And actually, if you get into 99 and 98 in Upper Deck, there's a bunch more of them that are like parallels. But those are sort of one-offs and not thought of as much as what you just mentioned, the PMG green.
Frankie does kind of confirm that, several 1-of-1s. Best ones are the masterpieces from Flair and Flair Metal, also some printing plates and Stadium Club. Carvin confirms Flair Ultra. Carvin owned the MJ, the Platinum MJ 1-of-1, and brokered a deal for a Filipino seller with 2 green PMG Michael Jordans. That's unbelievable. That's now at least $1 million worth of cards in one hand in 2 cards. Frankie also meant, yes, Hardcourt Baseline Grooves Gold 1-of-1. It's a wooden card. So there you go, Billy. Lots of knowledge in the room here tonight. Brett, this is a good question for you, Adam. How many cards typically in a year do you swap in and out of the top 100? And sorry, Brett, to interrupt your question, interrupt myself asking your question. But, you mentioned the LeBron Silver Prism a bit earlier, the 2012, Adam, and you said, that card's going to move from like 95 to number 20. When you do your top 100 list, do you in your description, do you say, hey, this is the card that took the biggest leap from last year to this year? Because that would be interesting. So, sorry, can you answer both questions?
Yeah, I'll add one other thing to it, which is that I didn't comment on Brett's number to 1, number to 100 set. And I think that's so cool, picking something that's so different than everybody else. And like, people talk about zigging while other people are zagging. Yes. Do the thing that you love to do, Brett. I don't even know you, but I'm like a huge fan already. So that was my first part there. And then your question, Jeremy, I have done some of this, like this one went up the most, this one, fell the furthest. I have done some of that, but it ends up being time consuming enough that like at this point I'm kind of just, and now it's highly detailed. If you read, usually I've got several paragraphs of information as well as creating a movie and stuff. So it takes some real time. I should probably do that. And then to answer Brett's last question there, the first time I did the list, from the first time to the second time, the first time I did it was on Blowout in 2018. And that was awesome. Like, that was so cool, like, in that format, because people got to like respond afterwards with why they liked it or why they didn't like it or whether they thought it was too high or too low. From that time to the second time, I think I switched out 17 cards in a year. But this year, because this year has been the year of Kobe for me, and I have really pretty dramatically changed my collection. Not the top 10, not the top 20 even, but like maybe even like 30 to 100. I've switched out a ton of cards this year. And so, I mean, it's probably, I'll bet it's 40 cards I've replaced. To your point also, Jeremy, the thing that I've done this year, and I know I'm jumping around all over the place, but I want to mention this because I think this is cool. Every day that I add a card, what I've done this year is I've done a side-by-side with it, and then the previous card that my followers voted that they liked more. So what I'm doing is saying, take the last card that you voted for as a winner versus today's card that I've voted higher. And what I've seen is that the voters, like, probably half the time disagree with me. But also what I've seen is there's a tendency for the voters to vote for things that are more recognizable or players that are more recognizable. So, like, I think I could post a $500 Jordan card against a $1,000 Chris Webber card, and people are going to vote for the $500 Jordan card.
Because they're familiar with it. Yeah, makes sense for sure. Ziggy wants to know, who's the youngest player in your list of 100? Luka, Ja, Zion, AD, Kawhi?
So it's Trae Young. I own the Trae Young Optic Gold Vinyl, which is a pretty big card. So the question is, why would I own that card? And it's because I need something speculative in my collection, and that was highly speculative. But again, this speaks to how I collect. I bought it for 20. I'll just tell you guys, I paid $2,500 for it. It was on eBay, and it was the night before or 2 nights before he scored 49 in a triple overtime game, and then all of his stuff exploded. It's, if you know anything about 2018 Optic, it's worth a whole lot more than that now. His, like, some cards that are numbered to 100 and to 50 are worth more than what I paid for the one of one, the best card of his. So I own that one. Do I think that he'll be better than Zion or Kawhi or Luka? No, probably not. But I think he's one of those rare guys that, like, has this kind of crazy, funny ceiling. And he could be. Like, I don't think he'll be better than Luka, but weird things happen in the NBA, man. Like, we always think, let's go back to 2015. Andrew Wiggins, or 2014. Andrew Wiggins was going to be one of the great players of all time. We forget that now. I remember people were saying, look, this is the best prospect since LeBron. They didn't mention guys like Durant. It was going to be it was going to be Andrew Wiggins, and Jabari Parker wasn't far behind him. Things happen. Injuries happen. Weird things happen in the league. And, there's a chance that Trae could be the best card on my list. Probably not, but there's a chance it could be in the next couple of years. There's a chance that it could fall out of the top 100. And that, to me, it's important to have one card like that on my top 100.
Very cool. I love that you have a spot on your top 100 for a card like that. And, you said things happen to player, personalities happen too, attitudes happen, and that can impact a player and how he gets along with his teammates. And is he really going to be successful, or is he just going to be bounced around the league because he's going to be a project to one team after the other? And eventually these guys just kind of fade away. So, okay. Jake says, Adam, what's the most extreme lengths you went to obtaining a card? Any great stories or adventures? Is there something that sticks out?
Oh man, I've got so many stories, Jake, and people who are listening to the show right now have helped me do it. Chris, who was on your last week's episode, helped me pick up. Okay, so I'm gonna back up. After Kobe passed away, I did what a lot of people did, which is I mourned for a time, which is a weird word to use for somebody you don't know personally, but like I really mourned. And it was weird because he was a guy who I rooted against. But I came out on the other side of that recognizing like what an important figure he's been in our hobby and in my life. I don't think I've watched any basketball player more than Kobe Bryant, which is crazy because I'm a Jazz fan, right? Maybe Karl Malone, I don't know. Anyway, so I decided to go get all the key Kobe Bryant cards I could get. And some people are thinking about value. How do they get the things that are going to go up the most? That's not the question that I ask. The question that I ask is, what cards do I want the most? And so there are two cards that I got the chance at, and they're kind of tied for this answer. One is the gold 2012 Prism Kobe, which is number 1 of 10. So it's literally the very first copy of a Kobe Gold Prism. That showed up on ComC. Now you're probably wondering, how is this an answer to Jeremy's or to Jake's question? The reason that this is an answer to that is when it popped up, I didn't have the money in my account to go get maybe the most expensive card I've ever bought. And so I actually had to contact somebody at ComC and structure a way for him to contact the seller to give me time to pay for it. Because I didn't want to go sell many dollars worth of cards to then not be able to get the cards. So I did a negotiation between me and a guy who worked at ComC with this guy, and he was willing to pull it off of ComC for a couple of weeks while the cards sold and then list it for me to buy it. And I was glad that he did that, because otherwise I think it probably would have sold. But I think he was happy to sell it to me, because it's nice to know you're dealing with somebody who's not going to try to take you for a ride, you know. And I'm not super condition sensitive the way some people are, so I wasn't as worried about the condition, but the condition was awesome. The other story that I'll tell you just real quick is there was a card that showed up after Kobe passed. There were a lot of people who listed cards of his that had them in, you know, their attics or their closets or whatever, and they just all listed them at the same time. So it created this very interesting situation where the market was flooded with cards that hadn't been available for a long time, and nobody had enough money to go buy everything they wanted to. And during that time, somebody listed the first Kobe Bryant autograph patch. There's 8 of them in the world. One of them hasn't been on eBay in over a decade. Like, you can't find a record of one ever being on eBay. The guy didn't put the word auto in the listing, just said patch. And I found this thing and I was like, what in the world? The guy had a feedback rating of 1. I looked the guy up on LinkedIn. I looked him up on Facebook. I did everything I could. And at the end of the day, I was just like, I need somebody to help me with this. So I called Chris and Christina, and they were willing to drive an hour and a half to help me get that card. And that's one of my very best cards. I wouldn't have it if they weren't willing to do that. So I paid them a little bit of money and said, thank you. You are the best humans I know. And now I have the first Kobe Bryant autograph patch, numbered 8. And for me, it's awesome.
Yeah, that's a major holding. Congratulations. And nice of Chris and Christina, co-hosts of House of Jordans, to go out of their way like that and get on the highway for an hour and a half for you. That's special for sure. Joe says, appreciate that the representation of eminence in the top 100 really has me investigating what's out there. Case in point, your LeBron inclusion. Josh says, I have 6 or 7 boxes of Ovechkin, 3 boxes of Nathan Horton. That's quite the PC. And I love Ovechkin's one of my favorite players to watch. So love that, Josh. Love it. And I knew you were a Nathan Horton collector. Carvin says collectors would rather sell and trade with collectors. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense too. It's nice to know. You know, I've set up at the expo for many years in Toronto. When the odd time that I have taken a card out of my personal collection to sell it, you know, sometimes it's like I interview the buyer. Like, what other cards are in this collection that this card is going into? Are you really going to love this card the way that I've loved it for 15 or 20 years? And, you know, there's been an occurrence where I just decided, you know, I'm not going to sell this card. This card is not going to go into that specific home for whatever reason. And I just kind of laugh at it now, but it's something that, you know, you feel strongly for. A lot of people refer to their cards as their babies. You know, I mean, they're babies. I mean, that's a term we use for our offspring, for, you know, for our children. So people, hey, and I love cards as much as anybody. I've said it 100 times. So we love our cards. I get that 100%. And you know, you want these things to end up where you want them to end up, and not just be flipped to be really appreciated. So love it. Okay. There's a major topic I still want to talk about, and we're coming up to we're at the hour and a half mark, but there's a topic that I put out there that we were going to discuss. today, so we have to discuss it and we want to discuss it, but let's totally switch gears. There's a boom going on right now in the hobby. Things are happening. The hobby is on this steep incline. Values are going up. Lots of new collectors / investors coming into the hobby. People are now dabbling in other sports. Even myself started dabbling in basketball a bit more than this recent thing a couple of years ago. But a lot of basketball people, I'm getting messages all the time right now from people saying to me, hey, because of you and your show, I'm interested in hockey now. And I'm like, well, that's super flattering. If this show can have a little bit to do with moving the needle towards helping the hockey market out, I'm proud and honored to be able to have a part in that. But it's really just it's just awesome. It's just awesome that people are now willing to look elsewhere because they love the hobby. And I think there's a lot of almost like exploitation going on, and people not, a bit of the whole FOMO thing. You don't want to miss out and you're also looking for where there can be value because, hockey is certainly the fourth sport in terms of sports collecting popularity. So maybe there is more value there, more opportunity, and people are opportunistic. Let's face it. So there's this boom going on right now. There was a boom in the late 80s, early 90s, as Ziggy has pointed out, the junk wax era. But there's differences between the 80s or late 80s, early 90s boom and this boom going on right now. Adam and I discussed it the other day. We've kind of got some thoughts on it. We have our own thoughts. Start with you, Adam. What are your thoughts on it in terms of like what's different between the boom right now that we're experiencing like literally in the last 3-4 months, as part of a year-long boom, but really we've seen the spike in the last 3 to 4 months versus the boom of the early 90s?
It's such a good question. There's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of differences, and there's been a lot that's been spoken about this. What's cool about this is, from our perspective, is that both you and I were there, right? We know what it was like. I remember it, and that's when I started collecting. I remember card shops that had 100 people in them and couldn't fit as many as they needed to for the bid board when the auctions were ending in the local in-store auctions. It was incredible. The thing that I would point out is we're just always, so I point something out and then I'm going to add to it. We're always going to see highs and lows, right? If I look back at my history in the hobby, some of the times that I remember most is high points. In 1992, when Shaquille O'Neal was a rookie, in 1999 and 2000, when Vince Carter really started to take off, and that was the same thing in football too. There was some really hot stuff in that area. When LeBron came out, his cards were incredibly popular. And then you go back to even 2000. In the last few years, it's been really popular. So, but there's this question, and that is what's different now than in the last couple of years, because we've certainly seen this increase. And I think there's a confluence of events. There's multiple people who are looking at this like a currency. It wasn't until a few years ago where I realized sports cards are a currency, and they're a currency just the same way as anything else is a currency. If you research how currency has evolved through time, currency used to be connected, at least in the United States, with precious metals, right? With gold, with the value of silver, and that's what it was tied to. Then at some point, the decision was made. Okay, currency is no longer tied to anything. A dollar is just worth a dollar because the government, say that it's worth a dollar, and then the value of that dollar fluctuates up and down, left and right. Well, cards are the same way, right? They are currency. They have value. The thing that's different about that and a dollar bill is like you like to look at the card. The card has something special about it. There's a specific number of a lot of these cards that are available for sale. And even the cards that are ultra mass produced that I've already acknowledged on this episode that I have no interest in, they still have a finite number that are out there. And I think people have become less tied to the idea that the dollar is the only currency. People are more willing to, especially after cryptocurrency, people are more willing to think in an abstract way about it. So I think that's the first part. I think the next part is that is that you've got people who are like you've seen with my son during this episode. You've got people who now have money who are bringing their kids into it, and the kids are buying a ton. And then the last thing that I would just say is that you have people who are willing to buy extreme quantities at extreme values. I've told plenty of people this. I've mentioned during this discussion today. I work in private equity, and our job is to go out and raise money sometimes. I could probably go raise a $10 million fund that just invested in basketball cards. And if I can do that, I can corner the market on a lot of stuff, and the values will grow exponentially. And then if the player also blows up, you have a situation where you have an incredible investment on your hand, and where you can set the market value. And so that's not really organic, but that unquestionably has happened along with the other things that are more organic.
Okay, man. Great comments, great insight. And, I'll build off of that now, and I'm going to probably go off for a couple of minutes here. So sip your drink, and sorry, everybody who wants to hear Adam talk, but I'm about to go for a few minutes here probably. So, but before we do, Ziggy, respect to Chris and Christina, great stories. Yes, Jason, I remember selling you your Howard-Chuck PSA 7. I'm glad you still have it. Amit, you're probably gone by now, but thanks for watching. You will catch the rest later. Okay. So my thoughts on the difference between the boom we're experiencing right now and the boom of the 90s is that there's one key differentiator that I see. And that key differentiator is that in the boom of the early 90s, the cards that were driving the hobby were the cards that were coming out in the early 90s. So cards like the Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card, the inaugural issues of Upper Decks, baseball, football, basketball, and hockey. These sets people were chasing cards in those sets. And therefore they were then starting to look back more historically to pick up cards that were older. But it was the current day's cards, the ones that were being released at that time, that were driving the hobby and bringing all the people in, and even then helping people or encouraging them, leading them back in time further, so that they were then going back and buying older cards as well. So to put that more succinctly, the current cards were driving the market and leading people to the older cards. What I'm seeing now is it's the opposite. It's the older cards that are driving. By older, I don't mean vintage like pre-1980 or even the 80s. I mean older cards, not the stuff being real, not the 2019, 2020 sets. They are out there. The Lucas and the Zions and the, in other sports as well. They are all fueling the boom. But I think what's really fueling the boom are the iconic players' commodity cards, like the LeBron James Topps Chrome, the Kobe Bryant, the Michael Jordan 86 Fleer, the Wayne Gretzky 1979 O-Pee-Chee, the 52 Topps Mickey Mantle, the 90s Jordans. The cards that I think are really pushing the hobby and bringing in people are the cards that aren't necessarily this year's Zion Prisms. Don't get me wrong. Again, those cards have their place and they are important right now. And they are bringing new people into the hobby because Zion is this new superstar, especially if you're in New Orleans. But I really think that it's the older cards that people are noticing because they're making headlines. When a 2012 Mike Trout, which is already 8 years old, sells for $900 and something thousand, people are going to take notice and they're going to consider it valuable. And they may start, Michael Jordan, he's the most iconic basketball player of all time. Wayne Gretzky, the Joe Montanas, the Tom Bradys, the Joe Namaths, all these players, the Emmett Smiths, even like guys, some of them are from that first Junk Wax era that are starting to drive it. So I think that to me is the key differentiator. In the 90s, the early 90s, late 80s, the cards of the day were driving the boom. Today, it's older cards that are driving the boom, not today's stuff. And I think it's a better foundation that the boom might, I'm calling it a boom, but it might be more of a beginning, or at least, not the end of it, where that boom crashed very quickly. By 93, 94, it was over. And that's why, that's why so many people left the hobby for the second half of the 90s, or even the last 2/3 of the 90s, and came back in the early 2000s when cards got much more interesting with autographs and memorabilia. So that's my take on the biggest difference. There's some comments here. Unless you want to go first, Adam, with anything to build.
The thing that I would ask you is, what gives you that? I think you're largely right, but is there anything that's like empirical that you would say kind of points you to the fact that like more people are looking at that, or is it just a sense based on message boards and talk with people?
I mean, it's watching the market. It's my through the lens I watch it on. I watch it through, which, I watch it pretty closely. I watch cards in all four sports. There's a website I go to regularly. I think it's Sports Collectors Daily. They have the most watched cards on eBay by sport. So it's a quick way to know what people are interested in and what's hot in the hobby. I go there and I go through all four sports. And if it's a card I want to watch just because I like to watch the hobby, I open up and I add it to my watch list. So, and I go through that probably once a week, and I add cards so that I know I can keep up, And if there's 3 or 4 Jordan 86 Fleers, I might watch all of them because I'll get a better cross section of what's going on in case one just goes silly because of a couple guys going against each other. But I'll do that for old cards. I'll do it for like a 51 Bowman Willie Mays. Meanwhile, I'll do it for a 2012 Mike Trout, and I'll do it for a couple of these cards. I'll watch a Wilt Chamberlain rookie, and I'll watch a Zion rookie, not because I'm looking to buy them, but because I want to see what's happening in the marketplace. That's really what it is. But it's also all the content out there, all the people talking, all the people I've talked to. What are people investing in? And, we've talked on the show before about the baseball prospecting world where you're truly, really gambling unless you're really at the preseason games and you're really studying these players and you happen to know what's going on with them personally. Maybe you might know if these are people that are going to make it in the league in the future, but you're gambling a lot when you're buying up the current players, and you can very quickly be turned off of the hobby. Whereas if you're buying the iconic players, the Hall of Famers, the legends, your investment is more secure. You're less likely to get turned off unless the whole world goes upside down. And like you said, it's a small chance that all these cardboard renditions of players become worth nothing. So that's really where I think it comes from for me. It's just my observation.
That's awesome. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to talk over you, but the only thing that I would add to that I think is interesting is we are seeing record numbers of new cards that are being graded. And to me that, and maybe what we're saying is you've got people who are coming back into the hobby because of some of the things that now they can afford that are historical and iconic and rare. And maybe now people are also sort of getting into some of the newer stuff because of that. But it seems like, it isn't a situation where one segment is growing and another segment is shrinking. It kind of seems like everything's growing at the same time. And that's where we're like in a spot that does remind you of the early 90s and seems, to your point, like it may be more sustainable, but you also have pandemics that could, I know what's happened during the pandemic so far. Cards have just gone through the roof, but I don't know that that's a guarantee going forward. And it's very fluid. It's very interesting. I don't know what'll happen, but I know that it is different than what we've seen before.
Yeah, and I'm certainly not saying that this is not going to fall off, or that we're not going to level out, or that we're not going to retreat a little bit. I think we will eventually. They can't just go up and up and up forever. That's just not going to happen. Then you're in a very fragile bubble, and that bubble will burst. And to your point about the new cards and that people are buying old cards and new cards, and old, I mean anything over like 3 years old right now, I think, or players that are established. Like a Luka's pretty much established, and his cards are only a couple years old. But a LeBron and a Kobe and an MJ, I mean, they're much older, to the tune of up to 17 years older now. And those cards aren't going to go down in value unless the whole hobby has a bit of an adjustment, which it will. I guarantee you, cards are going to come down in value again. Everything goes in cycles. And in 5 years later, we're going to be looking back at this time. I don't know where it will fall. Are we midway up the hill? Or are we almost at the peak? Or are we there? We don't know. No one knows where it's going to happen, what's going to happen. But I think when you see people investing thousands or tens of thousands into this year's rookie who's only played 30 games. I'm not talking about Zion because he might be special, but a guy who's only played 30 games or in any sport, and they're putting big money in, that's truly a gamble, unless you are a Zion who is almost guaranteed to be the next guy in line from the MJ, Kobe, LeBron, Zion, maybe Luka's in there too. So, and then I think, guys like Giannis, whose base silver prism PSA 10 now does like almost $2,000, if not more today. I mean, that's big money for a card, of a regular card that's like just inserted regularly into the packs. When you're spending that kind of money on Giannis, it almost makes sense if you think Zion's going to be like Giannis, well, maybe you want to spend that same money, or you're willing to spend that same amount of money on a Zion, on this year's player. And that's where if it's not Zion, but somebody else, that's where the more gamble comes in. So again, I think people are coming in, new investors are coming in because they want they're smart. A lot of these people are smart. They want the Jordans, the Kobes, the LeBrons, but then they're seeing, well, hey, if I'm going to pay, $10,000 for a LeBron or a Kobe rookie, I'll spend $2,000 on a Giannis, and then I'll spend $2,000 or $3,000 on Zion if he's going to become like a LeBron or a Kobe or an MJ. So it's kind of like, I still think, even based on what you said before, that the older stuff, the more entrenched players are driving a lot of the new stuff, versus in 1990, it was the new stuff that I feel was driving the old stuff, especially because, Beckett magazines were only out for a few years by then. People didn't understand all this value. They were buying the shiny holograms on the back of the cards more than they were anything else. They were collecting because they thought, well, hey, this is new. This is going to be valuable. I shouldn't say they were collecting the holograms on the back more than anything else, but this was the new shiny product that was out that people were into, and it was introducing them to the potential to invest. It was a mania at the time, and it very quickly burst. So I think this one is a bit different. I'm not saying it's not ever going to burst, but I think it's more sustainable than that other boom that we've been talking about. Okay. Let's see what we have for comments, because I'm sure there's a lot here that ties right in. So I might whip through some of these. Billy says, weren't there people in the late 80s, early 90s calling a drop in card markets? There's always a Peter Schiff calling a collapse. And when it happens, people only remember the correct prediction. Fair comment. I've called it tonight. Things are going to change. It's not going to stay this way forever. But it might be 1 or 2 months out. It might be 1 or 2 years out. It could be 5 years out, but it's coming. It's got to come. And I'm not saying it's going to crash. I'm saying it's going to adjust. It's going to correct, just like every market does. It's cyclical, right? We see it. You see it in every market out there. Alex, welcome to the party. Welcome to the show. Carvin says, more similar to digital currency. There's no intrinsic value. Value is based on demand and buyers. Agreed. It's because we attribute value, people are willing to put their money into it, and these cards have become a store of value. I will add, just before I let you add, Adam, that people are looking at this now as this is how you invest in athletes. If you want to own a piece of an athlete, you own their cards. Please.
The study of economy and supply versus demand, and supply and demand, that's a very basic concept and rules most of our thinking around this. Usually is where you need to begin and end these conversations with. And so I agree with Carvin there just tremendously. The thing that I'll add, though, and this comes from sort of my training and my profession, it's a recognition that real investment dollars, and I'm not talking about $20,000 or $100,000, I'm talking about tens of millions of dollars, that changes a market in a way that's foreign to us. And it makes it behave in a way that is similar to how we've seen the high-end stuff behave over the last 4 or 5 years. I personally believe there's more fund money and more, when we think about funds, we're talking about like alternative investment funds that are based in cardboard. I think there's more of that than people realize, or large wealth investors that are spending literally millions of dollars on some of these things so that they can almost prop up value to be what it really is. And they can do that almost going forward. And so I think that, when we talk about this supply versus demand thing, it's right. And it's where you should live and it's where you should think. But if you see things that are really unusual happening, just ask yourself, what if somebody came to the table with $20 million and said, I'm here to invest in this thing that's going to be over the next 20 years. And ask yourself, would somebody do that? $20 million isn't very much money, right? It's not.
It is to a single person, but in the whole economy, or in a subsection of the market, or in our market, it's not. I understand what you're saying.
But I actually do think in our market, it could be a lot, and it could prop up certain segments in a way that's really unbelievable, and it could be true that we're actually at the beginning of it. And so what I'm doing is kind of giving place for the idea that anything is possible from this point. I am not sure, and I've never had any idea whether we're at the top or the bottom of anything. I've never been good at predicting that, because I think there's so many factors at play. But if you told me that we're going to go up for the next 5 straight years, I believe you. If you told me that we're going to just completely bottom out and things are going to be worth nothing, I believe you. I have no idea, but that fund money, that real money that's out there as far as investments, is what maybe can lead you to think that we're not anywhere near the top.
Right. Yeah, no, I think there's a good chance that we are not near the top yet. We might just be at the beginning, which is kind of awesome to think about. And when you say, you'd believe it, you'd believe me if I said we're not going up, you'd believe me if I said we're not going up in value, we are going up in value, we're going down in value. I think really you'd believe that, yeah, it's possible. Whatever someone says the market's going to do, it might go that way. But no one can predict the way the market's going to go unless you're the guy that put in the 20 million and then you're going to stop and dump everything. Then you might have an indication of what could happen for sure. Okay. Carvin says we can't use sports cards in the true economics of the world. And that's interesting because, you actually today, I think, Carvin, you actually can, because if I want to go buy a house, all I need to do is list, a car. If I want to go buy a car, all I need to do is list $20,000 worth of cards on eBay, and within a week I've got the money in my bank and I can go buy a car. Now I can't go to the dealership and trade $20,000 worth of cards for that car, but if I turn that two-way deal into a three-way deal, I can do it. It's like Chris from House of Jordans has mentioned that he met a guy at a car dealership to do a deal. He gave the guy thousands of dollars for a card. The guy took that cash and gave it to the car dealer and bought a car with the money that he sold his card for. So in a way, you can use them, but you're not going to go to the dentist and pay him although if a dentist collects, he might take your card for fees. Like, why not? Especially, well, we won't get into cash deals and that, but off the books deals, I mean. But yeah, that's definitely I don't know. The cards, they don't have intrinsic value in that you can't eat them, you can't wear them, you can't live in them, but you can trade them for things. Just like dollar bills don't have there's no intrinsic value to a dollar bill. It's paper or whatever they're made of, and they burn just like anything. And you can't eat them, you can't sleep in them, you can't wear them. It's just a store of value, and cards are becoming a true store of value. And it's like I call them fun money, because money's no fun, but cards are fun, especially because they store value, and that value moves. And money actually devalues if you hold it too long over time against inflation. So you're probably better off holding something that has the chance to go up in value, which is why people invest in the first place. Okay. Ziggy says, why haven't you raised money for the fund? I've heard groups talk about investment money. Do you or any of your coworkers invest in cards? Are you surprised sports cards aren't on LinkedIn? I can tell you, for me, Ziggy, I actually did that probably about 4 years ago now. My poker buddies, I put together a bunch of them. They each, a couple of guys threw in $1,000 or $2,000. I raised some money, not quite 5 figures, and I invested in 5 cards for these guys, and I still have these cards. And let me say, it was $7,000, and those cards are now easily worth double. And maybe now's the time to reach out to these guys and say, hey, do you want to sell? But I'm not going to advise that. I think hold them for as long as you can. Why not? So, and I think more and more people are doing things like that now. But to the big question, really, why haven't you raised money for the fund? Well, I don't know that that's really your job, Adam, to raise money to raise money for a card fund. You work in a professional financial firm that is dealing in equities that are regulated. Our hobby is not regulated, so the real traditional investors are going to do this as an alternative, not as a main thing. Please comment, Adam.
So this is a super interesting conversation, and for those people who've stayed with us, the full 2 hours, this is probably an interesting thing to hear. So I'm sitting in my office right now, and we're not going to tell you anything about where I work and that sort of stuff. People could probably figure it out if they tried, but we run $500 million worth of assets, and I'm the controller here, and it's a great place to be, and I love it. I cornered my boss, which is a little bit scary, about a year ago, and I talked him through what our market looks like and what kind of investment opportunity I saw. And he looked at me and he said, I think we should do something. And I said, let's talk more about it. And what his idea was, why don't we raise a $10 to $15 million, these are his words, why don't we raise a $10 to $15 million fund? Because, I haven't spent any of my own money on cards in a long time, right? Like, I have this collection. My cost basis in my collection right now is like $1,000. And when you look at the value of the collection, you go, that can't be right. It's right because of the way that the market moves. If you've been in this industry for a long time, and if you've been in the hobby for a long time, I shouldn't call it industry, but you know how things work, and you have an opportunity to make money here and there. And for me, I just built a collection along the way that's worth significantly more than that. But I've been able to pay for a good percentage of my house and a good percentage of my cars and those types of things historically and I haven't done it in a while. I haven't cashed out of my collection in probably 7 or 8 years now, 6 or 7 years. But there's an incredible chance to make money there. If I wanted to, I think that I maybe could actually do that here. I think I'm in a very unique spot where I could really run a $10 million commitment-based fund on cardboard. And to some people that will sound crazy, except for the fact that if you'd given me $10 million 10 years ago, you'd have a lot of money now. And that's not just me. That sounded very arrogant, look at me, I would have done this. Jeremy would have done the same thing, and a lot of other people would have done the same thing, because there's a lot of smart people in this hobby. And so it is possible. The question of why, Ziggy, I haven't done it is because for me, I actually think it's more beneficial for me to just keep doing my own thing. If I was a fund manager in this world, I would feel the responsibility to sell my cards so that I could not have the incentive to increase their value through being a manager. I hope that makes sense, but you can manipulate the market in a way if you're out there buying different things, and that wouldn't be something that I would feel comfortable with, nor would I think it would be right. So that's why.
Awesome. Okay. Chris says, only difference now is that there are 30 parallels of cards that are serialized. Boom now seems similar to the early 90s to me based on what I read about. Chris, I strongly disagree. There are many more differences than that. We'll leave it at that. Carvin says, best investment, vintage cards, pre-70s, high-grade cards. Again, how do we know that? How do we know that that's the best investment? Is that where there's the most room for growth? I do know that that's what Gary Vee is talking about on Twitter right now. He's saying almost every day, buying vintage cards from up until 1980 something or something like that. So you might be right, because when Gary speaks, he's got millions of people listening. So that could be driving that market as well. For all collectible cards, says similar to trading cards, AKA vinyl, other sports memorabilia, comic booms. Oh, he meant books. Stefan, welcome to the show. Just hopped in, had a hockey game. Glad to catch the tail end of the show and some sorting background music tomorrow. Awesome, man. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Also says, Gordy's the best investment, hands down. No arguments will be recognized. He collects Gordie Howe, who's a fine player to collect. Paul says the weirdest part of COVID is pre-COVID. The weirdest part of pre-COVID is current player price increases are almost always based on performance. There are players that in the NHL and NBA aren't going to play until the leagues restart in January. So, that's interesting. And it's true, because we were talking earlier and I had this thought that, things happen and players' values move, because things are happening. Like they got traded, they signed a new contract, they scored 50 points in an NBA game, he scored 5 goals in an NHL game, they won the Stanley Cup, the NBA championship. Nothing's happening right now, and the market is moving like crazy. Nothing is happening in sports, and the market is moving like crazy. But it's really what isn't happening that's moving the needle. things like sports gambling, fantasy sports, people spending money on travel, other luxury items. There's just more money out there that people can put into cards, and they're looking for that action. And cards are action because you can now follow a daily. And if you're a member of Card Ladder, House of Jordan, Chris from House of Jordan's new project, you can watch your portfolio move daily, and like they're pulling in the daily values of some of those commodity type cards, which a lot of people collect. So that's a great tool for them. Carvin says, after COVID, all sports distractions is watching the hobby. That is our daily sports entertainment beyond eBay, online breaks, podcasts, etc. No real sports. We need our sports fix. That's what I was just saying. 100% agree with that. Not exactly sure at what point of the convo we are at. I think the basketball market will level off in the coming year, not crash because there's too much new money in the hobby, but level out. And I think a level out is inevitable. Is it in the next year? Maybe. Likely, but we're just speculating. Nobody knows. We're all speculating, and that's what makes this show fun. We get to speculate. Ziggy says, "Are you a fan of Panini's blockchain cards? Is anyone?" I'm not. Don't know much about it. Don't really want to get into that right now. Steve says no. Carlos says, couldn't agree more. As impressive as big sales are, until six-figure and million-dollar sales become common in the market, it hasn't really hit maturity that is game-changing. But we're getting there, right, Carlos and Adam? We're seeing more and more. I mean, there was a time when you wouldn't see a modern card sell for more than 20,000. That Steven Strasberg Superfractor 10 years ago hit 20,000. People were going nuts. Now it's commonplace for cards to sell for 20, 40, 50, $80,000. Not that many years later. Like, Adam?
Yeah. I the way that I would speak to this is, there was a time where I said, I will never spend over $100 on a piece of cardboard. And then there was a time where I said, I will never spend more than 1,000. And then I remember specifically a point where I said, I will never spend more than 4,000. And now I'm at this point where I'm like, I have no idea how much I'd be willing to spend. What I realize, though, is I believe in the marketplace, and I don't think that any of us has any idea. I never thought in a million years, you could never have convinced me that I would be willing to spend what I've spent on cards. But it's because I've been able to sell other cards for it. So clearly there's other people out there who are willing to buy. And it's amazing. But a $20,000 sale, never would have heard of it. Even 5-6 years ago, very, very rare. Today, it means almost nothing.
Yeah, back 5 years ago, that was the 52 Topps Mickey Mantle. Those kinds of cards were hitting that kind of money. I mean, there's the Honus Wagner, which was in its own stratosphere, but you weren't hearing about many cards passing that $20,000 mark, like you said, even 5 years ago. Jake says, could we see corporations start adding sports cards to their investment portfolios? That would seriously change the game. I mean, interesting thought. Why not? Tax law becomes a big part of that too, and how that's going to be treated. Steve says, we're in the second and third inning of a baseball game. Yeah, maybe we are. That's where I hope we are, because I like growth. I like seeing growth, and I'm invested as a collector. I happen to be, by consequence, invested as well. Like so many people watching are, like you are, Adam. We're investors by consequence, not because we set out that way. And a lot of these people coming in now are investors that I think several will convert to collectors as well. Because let's face it, cards are effing cool. Okay. Carvin says, just something to ponder. 90% of all private stock customers that buy and sell their stocks lose money, even if they are 70% right, because the stock market is just another gamble. I work for a company that we are publicly traded, and I see what people say in our investor group on Facebook, and I have to shake my head because I just know that they don't really know what people think they know what's going on in a company, but unless you work in the company, trust me, you have no idea. Doesn't really, it's not, companies share information through their financial disclosures, their financial statements, their management discussion and analysis that comes out regularly, but you don't really know what's really going to happen in 5. You don't know in the minds of the man, and companies are run by managers, and managers are human. I'm talking the president's still a manager, the CEO, they're managing the company. They're human. They can make mistakes. They have emotions. Things happen, right? You just never know. It's kind of the sports card investments are similar in that you don't know if a player is just going to lose it all of a sudden and go all OJ Simpson and lose value completely, or whatever it is, or just storm off the team or piss off his teammates, become unliked in general, career-ending injuries, pandemics. You just don't know what's going to happen. What's up, 90s basketball? All right. Billy says, MJ or LeBron could easily move their own rookies with very little investment. Add Mahomes to that list now. Yeah, that's always fun to think about players buying their own cards. Awesome interview on Christina's Corner, Jake. Yeah, Christina's Corner is a spinoff of House of Jordans, and Jake was a guest. Jake, I still haven't watched that. I just haven't had time, and I said I was going to watch it the other night. I didn't get around to it. I'm going to watch it. I look forward to watching it. Check that out. Jake from 90s Baseball Cards is a guest on Christina's Corner. Paul says to play the ponies and be successful, you only have to be right 20%. I'm not a ponies gambler, so I can't really comment on that. Not customers that are buying retirement funds or mutual funds. Okay, I kind of lost context, so I'm going to be more selective on the comments here. All right, and we are coming to the end. I mean, we're past the 2-hour mark already, Adam. I feel like we're just getting started, though. Steve says, I'm so upset. I got into cards, back into cards exactly 1 year ago. Yeah, you are upset because you wish you got in any time earlier than 1 year ago. 2 years, 10 years, 20 years, doesn't really matter. Carvin says, agreed. Cash has true value. If card market drops in value, you can't use it in the real world. Cards might not be liquid in a down market. Cash remains liquid always. Fair comment. Steve says, a little secret for me, I've not bought a card in 6 weeks. Prices are all over, and I bought about 10K worth of cards in just my first year back in the hobby. You know, that's a significant investment, and welcome back. Welcome back, Steve. And just, you know, be careful. Buy what you like, and you know, kind of just don't try to avoid the mistakes. Try to avoid the pitfalls that so many people make when they first come in, because they're maybe following hot trends. And I would recommend don't just buy cards of a player because that player had a great week. You know what I mean? Look more long-term if you can. If you're patient and develop certain skills, you can get great deals. Definitely. Carvin, I'm in. We should talk. Not sure what that's about, but if that's about coming back on my show, Carvin, thank you very much. Love to have you back again. Okay. Great answer, and understand the ethical conflict that Adam was mentioning. That's exactly what I wanted to mention earlier when Adam was saying why he's not doing a card fund. Conflict, there's just too much room for bias and conflict there for sure. Steady growth, better speculative, says Carvin. Yes. Steve says established players are a smart, safe investment. Prospects are players showing they can be real stars. I've learned fluctuate game to game. Yeah, definitely. Alex says, can my Andrea Bargnani super collection spike in value? Please, please. Don't speculate. Buy what you like. That's what we've been saying. Okay, we're at the end of the comments. Thank you, everybody who's watching, for the amazing interaction tonight. It really is. You know, I love doing the show because I love just having these live. I feel like I'm running a marathon here. You know, I love having these lively discussions with the guest, and when everybody viewing gets involved, it truly makes it so much more enjoyable for all of us, and hopefully for you guys out there too. For Adam, my guest tonight. Listen, man, I mean, the only thing we didn't talk about, and we're 2 hours, 12 minutes already, it's getting late, was the fact that a lot of sellers, including the big online consignment sellers, you touched on it earlier, but they're now using the term jersey and patch interchangeably on eBay listings. And I think it's a little bit misleading because as a hobby, we consider a patch to be a lot different than a jersey piece, which you mentioned earlier. Patches are they're rarer. There's fewer of them available on a jersey. But I think a lot of it might have to do with the fact that some of the cards are named that way. It might be a patch card, but it may say it might be called an autograph memorabilia card versus an autograph patch or an autograph jersey, which kind of grays the lines a little bit there. But this was, Adam, this was something that you based about 12 minutes of a segment of your podcast on, the basketball card podcast, which is on the stream right there on the ticker, everybody down there. So if you haven't, if you're not listening to his podcast, check it out. If you're not following Adam on Instagram yet, please do. One of my favorite accounts to follow, if not my favorite. Where was I? Can you please speak to that? How did you notice this, and what are your feelings on it?
Yeah, I think that this is a really interesting topic, and I'll tell you how I noticed it. I noticed it on a card that I was looking up that I have the patch version. And I noticed a listing from one of the main consigners that or consignment companies that listed their card as a patched auto. But the patch auto was numbered to 10. It's a thicker card stock. It's a significantly different card than the jersey that was numbered to 50. This is a 2004 SP Authentic card. I own the Kobe Bryant. It's a patch auto. It's a really sweet card. It's numbered to 10. And somebody else listed a card that's similar, but it was the jersey version as a patch. And so as somebody who cares about the value of my card, I saw that and I went, no, this is wrong. And I want to point out that it's wrong to everybody. But then as I started paying more and more attention to it, as the weeks went by, I realized, man, it seems like people don't even know the difference between a patch and an autograph, or a patch and a jersey anymore. And I agree that there's some things that make it tough because, you look back to the first jersey cards, that's 1997 Upper Deck. A lot of those Jordan cards, all of the Jordan All-Star jersey that year was packed out, or at least a huge percentage of it was, including pieces of it that we would consider a patch, right? But that wasn't the first patch auto. That was the first jersey auto. So it's confusing, right? Like it was a jersey auto that contained patch cards, but it was designated by the company as a jersey card, right? Since that time, Upper Deck and every other company that I know of, especially in the late 90s and in the 2000s, designated a difference between the two almost without exception. And it feels like a little bit like we're like sellers are trying to rewrite history, calling jersey auto rookies RPAs, calling jersey cards patches, because you add that patch to it, and of course you get more people watching. It's the same thing as spamming non-auto or something like that. The difference here is that I think that when you write non-auto, people can tell it's not autographed. When you write patch, sometimes I think the newer collectors might not understand the difference. And to somebody who's very interested in finding like the best version of certain cards, I think it's really important to understand the distinction between the two. I know some people don't like patch cards, and that's fine. You not listen to this part of the conversation. But to those of us who do care about the history of it, seeing, knowing people who know full well include the word patch when it shouldn't be there seems kind of disingenuous, kind of
sneaky.
It's not okay. It's a little bit sleazy, and I don't think that we should try to rewrite history. So, when you're looking at a card and you see that it's numbered and you think, oh, that's a really good looking card, do your research, find out what the rarest card is. The only other example that I'll give on this is there was a Kobe jersey auto that sold recently, and it's one of his first jersey autographs. And again, this is another story, but one of the big consignment companies listed it, and they listed it as jersey patch auto. And then in the description, they said it was his first jersey. It wasn't his first jersey. It was his second jersey auto. It's still a significant card, really, really significant card. But it wasn't a patch. And so I kind of called him on it. I was like, this isn't a patch, guys. Let's get that right.
Yeah, no, agree. And I'm just going to pull up Billy's comment here because he says, isn't it basically semantics at this point when companies are using photo shoot jerseys for everything? And I actually don't think so at all. I think that Billy, I think that statement's completely inaccurate actually, because first of all, it's not semantics. There is a difference in the aesthetics of a jersey versus a patch. Patches are more textured. They have layers. They have more colors. They're more interesting and people want them more. Jerseys are often one color. They just don't look as nice in cards. And then secondly, they're not using photo shoot jerseys for everything. That's just a false statement to say that they're using them for everything. They use them here and there, but they use game-worn jerseys as well. So to say everything, it almost implies that they're not using game-worn equipment anymore, game-worn jerseys in the card. So I just disagree with that, but that's fine. What you said before, Adam, when you said that, the first set, Upper Deck, they put out patch cards, but they called them jersey cards. And I think that's completely fair and honest, because at the time that they didn't maybe realize yet that there was going to be such a big distinction in the hobby between jerseys and patches. It all came from the jersey. So they didn't care if it was a piece of the jersey or a piece of the number or the nameplate or the patch. It was all from the jersey. And then they realized, hey, wait, we've got these premium sections of the jersey and we're going to call them patches. And really, they're not patches. They're logos, their numbers, their letters, right? patch is just a word we use to categorize all of those things. So interesting though. And I see how, because that's how it started, and maybe some of these sellers are using that to their advantage to mislead people. I hope not. I would like to think not, but it's hard to ingenuous, as you said, with that. So, okay, Steve, I just want to say welcome to Sports Cards Live. Thank you for tuning in. Great that you ran into this show through House of Jordans. Thank you so much for joining. And everybody watching, I appreciate everyone's viewership as always. If you haven't yet subscribed to the Sports Cards Live channel on YouTube, please do. Please consider doing that. I would greatly appreciate it. I want to thank Adam for bringing new viewers to the show tonight. Adam has almost 3,000 followers on Instagram. So I'm sure you brought some new people to the channel today, Adam. I greatly appreciate that. I hope that by you appearing here, we're able to get you a few more followers, new friends, some more friends as well through this on Instagram or anywhere. Ziggy says, how about this? Can you raise a 10 million? Let me and Jeremy run the fund. Ziggy, let's do it. Fist bump. All right. What else do we have here? Chris says you can report people for keyword spam on eBay for the non-auto. Yes, of course you can. Great point. Thank you. Frankie says they are playing the keyword search game, adding any possible tag to attract buyers. Yes, they are. Fair comment, truthful comment. And that's just one of those things where like eBay etiquette comes into play, and a lot of people have different opinions on that. Okay, and Steve says, great show, guys. Thank you, Steve. Maybe on that note, Adam, we should end this. So again, thank you so much, Adam, for joining me. We're 220, one of the longer episodes. Again, I feel like we could keep on going. Have had a lot of fun with you. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the viewers for watching. Again, managed to get Dr. James Beckett to be my guest on episode number 30, sort of an anniversary episode. So I asked him to join me for that one. He agreed. Super excited about that. Going to put up just on the screen below here kind of some of the other upcoming episodes. This coming Saturday, Chris Barr, Panini basketball brand manager, will be my guest. And then next Wednesday is Grant Sandground, who's the director of product development for Upper Deck. Some serious heavies in the industry, if you will, that are going to be joining me in the next couple of weeks here. You put those two guys with Dr. Beckett, and we've got a great lineup of guests coming up. Adam, final thoughts, man. I hope you had a good time tonight. I hope this was enjoyable. I know you stayed in the office to do this. Thank you for making sure you had the great, look at how clear and focused he is, guys. Like, great internet connection, which I always appreciate. And Paul, great show. 2 hours flew by just like they did for me. There aren't enough hours in the day to report all the listings like that for sure. Adam, thanks, man. Thank you so much. Final parting words. Dude, this was a blast. The thing that people don't know is that we got together for like 2 hours last night and talked too. The great thing about this, and this is why I loved working in the card shop for 7 years, you can talk about cards forever. These episodes, you will never run out of episodes, especially with guests like the ones you have coming up. You're doing I told you this, personally, but I'll tell you again. Like the job that you're doing right now of bringing on people, of which I don't consider myself in this group, but people who are industry leaders and experts who are smart, who can teach us. You're teaching the hobby and you're providing entertainment simultaneously, and that's amazing. And so, Jeremy, just thank you for being a positive influence on the hobby. And the only thing I would say is where you've got a lot of responsibility because people are watching, and like it's a big deal. So I just I hope that it just keeps going well for you, and you just crush it, dude, because you're doing an awesome job. Well, thanks, man. That's very flattering. Thank you so much. I do appreciate it. I'm loving doing this. I get so excited for each episode. I have so much fun doing it. I'm sitting here. It's like I'm looking at the comments. I got my notes. I got you. I got to drink my water. It's like whoa. It's like I'm multitasking. It's a serious rush. I love doing it. I love the hobby as much as anybody you'll ever meet in your life. I love cards, and I'm very fortunate to have the connections I do to attract these guests like Dr. James Beckett. I mean, nobody is more famous in our hobby than him. Anybody, athletes aside, and they don't count. He's number one. He's the most iconic name in our hobby. And like I said at the beginning of the show, if you told 15-year-old me that this many years later I'd be having him as a guest on the 30th episode of my sports card talk show on YouTube called Sports Cards Live, I'd be like, really? That's what I'm going to be doing when I'm that old? Anyway, it's awesome, and I see the responsibility in it, and I appreciate those comments. It's cool because to me, there's really no rules. Just be kind to one another. Let's not bash anybody. I'm not in the bashing game. Try not to use swear words on the show. But really, there's no true rules. I don't have any sponsors. I don't owe anyone anything. I can kind of just have the guests I want, and make sure that we keep it a nice, clean, swift-moving show so that the time does go by quickly and it's entertaining. So, but the part about the responsibility, I never really thought about that. So I will consider that more as time moves on. But it is a privilege to bring these guests out to everybody to see. It truly is. I can't even say enough about that. We're gonna fade out with the final comments that have been strolling in, and then I'm gonna end this thing. So Adam, thanks again so much. Steve says Dr. Beckett is a cool guy. You can hear him on an episode of Conversations with Chris, which is on the House of Jordan's channel. Doobie Collect says, appreciate the great and informative content. Keep up the awesome work. I will do my best, Doobie Collects. Thank you for tuning in. Frankie, as always, thanks for tuning in. Loyal watcher. Joe, bravo. Thank you so much. Doobie, you the man. Jeremy, I'm a man. I'm not the man. I'm a man. Thank you, Doobie. Thank you for joining the show. First time I've seen you, so really happy to have you watching. Brett says your enthusiasm shows. Jeremy, kudos. There's no doubt that I am enthusiastic about this show, this hobby, the guests, and all you viewers. Guys, thanks everybody for watching. I'm going to hit end broadcast. It's going to spin for a second as we wait for it to end. So let's do that.